Good afternoon. We will now call the meeting of the Waco City Council on June 2nd, 2020 to order at 1:31 p.m. Joining me online today are Mayor Pro Tem Andrea Bearfield, Councilmember Hector Sabito, Councilmember John Kennard, Councilmember Dylan Meek, and Councilmember Jim Holmes. Please join us now for a moment of silence. Thank you. On March 16, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meetings Act pursuant to his state of disaster authority. The change was effective March 16, 2020 until further notice or until the state disaster declaration expires. In accordance with distancing guidelines and while providing as much transparency as possible, this Waco City Council meeting will not be open to the public. This meeting is being broadcast live at wccc.tv. The audio is also being recorded, and video and audio recordings will be available to the public. According to the governor and attorney general, statutes that may require face-to-face interaction between members of the public and public officials are suspended, provided, however, that the governmental body must offer alternative methods of communication with their public officials. This includes public comment on agenda items. In an effort to allow for as much public input as possible, those who wish to submit their written comments on a listed agenda item were asked to submit their comments to the City Secretary's office by 11 a.m. today. The City Secretary will read into the record the comments submitted for the items on the agenda at the appropriate time. Individuals who registered to speak on a public hearing item will be allowed to speak via conference phone for 3 minutes. We will now recess the regular session and convene the work session with a report from the City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon to you and council members. There are 2 changes to the agenda today. There are 2 addendums. The first adds a resolution and work session addressing the vacancy in Council 4 position. The second addendum adds a discussion item to the council reports in the business session. Under employee recognition and organizational update today, I wanted to give you all a story that was relayed to me from our park ranger supervisor. On Friday, May 22nd, the park rangers received a call that a boat had floated away from its owner at Brazos Park East. The rangers picked up their ranger boat and headed to assist. When the rangers arrived on the scene, they witnessed the tail end of a heroic feat by 2 of our park's maintenance workers. After the boat floated away from the ramp, a citizen who was standing by attempted to swim across the Brazos to retrieve the boat for the owner. He was unsuccessful, panicked, and almost drowned. Juan Camacho and Jimmy Chavez were working nearby and used a long water hose to pull the citizen to shore. The quick thinking of Juan and Jimmy saved the man's life. Another citizen on jet ski had also arrived at the scene and helped bring the boat back to the shore. But I wanted to congratulate Juan and Jimmy on their quick thinking and their great work, and they are great city employees, and they exhibit everything that's good about the city of Waco. So I wanted to acknowledge them today. I also wanted to acknowledge and recognize our new incoming city manager, Bradley Ford. And I am really excited about Bradley coming to work. He's been working here for a while, but moving into that position, I look forward to a transition with Bradley. And he's the one with the jacket on, and I'm the one with the polo. And so you can see which one's coming in and which one's going out. And thank you, Bradley.
Thanks, Bob.
And under informal reports today, there is one informal report that has to do with the Cities for Financial Empowerment Financial Navigator Program that Councilmember Kennard assisted in getting that grant for us. If there's any questions on that, Assistant City Manager Deidre Emerson is here to address those.
I don't have questions, but I did want to say, number one, I appreciate the report from staff. I love that this program is happening here in our community. I also want to acknowledge and thank Councilmember Kennard for his research and due diligence in putting this program together and making sure that it comes to fruition. I'm very excited to see that this is happening. I really see the benefit of this happening in Waco and the number of families that it will benefit down the road. And I really believe that we are doing something that's going to impact generations to come. And so I'm very excited about this. And once again, thank you to Councilmember Kennard and staff for all of their work on this project. And also thank you to Prosper Waco for partnering with the city of Waco on such a tremendous, I would call it monumental occasion that we're celebrating here. So thank you so much for everyone involved.
Yeah, I'll jump in here too on the informal report on this financial navigator program. Thanks again, John, for kind of leading the charge on getting this in. Kind of fits into a lot of things we're doing on the the business and individual recovery from the COVID. Because I see as part of that task force, which I think a lot of us are all seeing as we lead these special projects, are some longer term programs that can come out of that. This is definitely one of them. That if you look at page 10, connecting families, pre-counseling efforts to develop budgets, providing guidance in this CARES Act. I mean, all this stuff is very, very useful, and again, can be to the long-term benefit of the community. So thanks again, John.
I will echo our council members and just say that this is really an opportunity not only for the citizens of Waco to receive this financial literacy and fiscal empowerment, but it really offers up another chance for our financial leaders and the banks and credit unions in our city to engage with our community and provide access to capital that has not been as engaging as it potentially could be for all of our communities. So I applaud this effort. Thank you, Councilmember Kennard, for reaching out and reaching up for it, and our community organizations for receiving and preparing to see it through. But this is really a chance to change some narratives, some historical narratives here in Waco, and I'm proud to see it happening.
And I'll just say thank you guys for that and for your support on this. And we actually are probably a few weeks away from actually rolling it out. So an official press release won't be forthcoming for another week or so. And you mentioned Prosper Waco, and they really are the ones housing and moving this, and Herman's Ray especially, along with our 3 nonprofit partners. It's all still kind of in process, but we're getting there, and should hopefully within a few weeks be able to let the public know about it and really start kind of marketing and getting the program out and available for everybody within our community. And just to Andre's point, I mean, yes, I do see this as part of our broader financial empowerment and security work that we as a city and a community have identified to really work towards benefiting all of our citizens. Another grant that the city received, the City Start grant through the CFP fund. Been working with Baylor and some other folks and putting that together, and we should have a blueprint ready for y'all's review hopefully by the end of the summer. So we're working on that too. That will identify this and counseling and many other things that we hope to implement to continue this type of work. But thank you guys very much. This is going to be really beneficial and be a great resource within our city.
Thank you, Council. And now I'd like to call on Larry Hosey to give the Hosey Report.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's get the projector thing working good this time. We've tested it, I think, and we're ready to go. Love your pet, leash your pet. These are new signs that are showing up around town and in area parks to help remind citizens that leashing your pet is required in the city of Waco. The signs are a way to remind pet owners when they are out and about, keeping their dog on a leash is for their safety and yours. Fines for not leashing your pet or not picking up after them can reach up to $500. The Mosquito Control and West Nile Virus Plan is an annual activity that involves 10 city departments providing services to eliminate mosquito breeding sites, inform the public about protection and prevention, and provide insect repellent to prevent bites. This year's team is assembled, insect repellent and supplies have arrived, and ready to stop the mosquito, stop the bite, stop the disease. For the past 3 years, the efforts by these city departments have helped keep the number of reported cases of mosquito-spread viruses that the health district monitors at a level that was virtually non-existent. In a partnership with EOAC and the city of Waco, a new rental assistance program provides assistance with rent and mortgage payments to help families who have been affected by COVID-19 due to loss of job or reduction of income. To avoid an eviction and foreclosure, the program assists the families with up to 3 months of payments not to exceed $2,400. The EOAC is taking applications by appointment only. Citizens may schedule appointments by visiting EOAC website at eoacwaco.org. A link is also available on the covidwaco.com website listed under Community Resources. The 2020 Greenwood Cemetery Improvement Project is underway and includes the establishment of an ornamental perimeter fence and decorative masonry entrances. This important heritage project is proceeding in close coordination with HCS Construction, the Texas Historical Commission, the Texas Department of Transportation, and the on-site archaeologists. Ornamental fence installation is wrapping up, while the construction of the 4 decorative entrances will continue through the month of June, with a formal dedication expected in July. The Cameron Park Zoo has 3 new baby tortoises in their tortoise family. On May the 5th, the pancake tortoise was born. On May the 6th, the Holmes Hinge tortoise was born. And on May the 7th, another Holmes Hinge tortoise was born. It's always exciting to see new babies arrive at the zoo that opened to the public last Friday. Hawaiian Falls also opened for the season on Friday, May the 29th. Social distancing efforts are being observed in all areas, and staff is checking the water chemistry every hour. The Waco Water Department is now able to serve Waco residents more quickly and conveniently with Water Connect, which began yesterday. Water Connect is an automated, interactive voice response phone system that customers can choose to pay their water bill and get account information without having to wait to speak to an agent. You're still able to speak to a live local agent during regular hours, or you can use the new Water Connect system to pay your bill, get account information over the phone any time of the day or night. And that completes my report.
Thank you, Larry. Mayor and Council, in the agenda today, we have one public hearing, and our Planning and Inspection Director, Clint Peters, will go over that item in work session. There are 17 resolutions. The first I'd like to highlight is actually 5 resolutions. Resolution 2020-356 through 360. All of these are related to the Waco Regional Airport, and these items will be covered by our Airport Director, Joel Martinez, in the work session. Resolution 2020-362 is our annual audit, and this is just a renewal, 1-year renewal of our contract with James Rittenmeyer, Boyd & Terrell for our annual audit for fiscal year 2019-2020. Resolution 2020-369 is a standard utility agreement with TxDOT, State of Texas, for the reimbursement of an emergency repair that we had to make to a 48-inch wastewater main that's located under Interstate 35 at MLK. And this reimbursement will be estimated at $315,348.75. Also under resolution.
Hey, Wiley, I'm sorry, real quick. Can I ask about a resolution 369?
Sure.
Is it a reimbursement that once the project is completed, then we're reimbursed?
Yeah, the project is complete.
Okay, so it is done.
Yeah, we've been working with TxDOT to work out a reimbursement agreement with them. So
Okay,
we completed
perfect.
the work.
Thank you, sir.
Resolutions 2020-371 and 372. These both have to do with the transfer lift station force main W. Mars project. We have 371, which is a change order that includes the one change order and then 2 additional ones. You received a new resolution here earlier that eliminates the need for the last 2 change orders, 9 and 10. This is because I think staff has figured out a way to continue pumping the system and keep the wastewater flowing without using the auxiliary pumps and all the diesel that they've been using there. So we're going to use that. We're going to start that alternative process, and then the expenses that we incur for that will be brought back to the council as a ratification. And then resolution 372, this approves additional funds for an amendment to the existing contract with Lockwood, Andrews, and Noonan for additional engineering design and project management for a total contract increase of $769,329. This makes the total contract there to be $5.8 million. This is a roughly, I think I mentioned, $45 million sewer project, the largest one we've done certainly in my tenure. And it's a very important project, handling most of the wastewater that flows out of Waco and some of the customer cities to the WMAR Central Plant. And then there are 12 ordinances today. All of them are second readings. And unless you have any questions, that concludes my report.
Oh, the mayor's on mute.
You're muted, Mayor. Okay,
Y'all weren't hearing any of
there
that.
you go.
Are there any questions or comments? All right. Any items that
I just asked her to do that so there wouldn't be any questions.
any items that council members would like to pull from the agenda, from the consent agenda? All right, thank you. Then in that case, the consent agenda will include resolutions 2020-356 through resolution 2020-372, with the exception of resolution 2020-360, unless a comment card is received on another consent agenda item. And I will turn it back to Riley to introduce you. Go ahead.
That was resolution 371 was the item pulled from consent. 360 was also pulled for a comment that we received, but
360 and 371 are pulled.
Correct.
Okay, for the consent agenda. All right.
Mayor,
I will turn it back to Riley to introduce the next presentation.
hey, did you want to move to the work session on Council District 4 first?
Yes, let's do that, please.
okay.
I'll turn it over to Esmeralda.
Yeah, let me get there.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get there. Afternoon, Mayor and Council. I wanted to go over the process for the appointment for a Council District 4 vacancy. At the 6 p.m. business session, you're going to be considering a resolution 2020-386 declaring a vacancy in District 4 position for City Council and initiating the appointment process to fill that vacancy. And what I'd like to do is provide an overview of the appointment process for your consideration. And then if there is a consensus that we can move forward with that process. Councilmember Meek's current term for District 4 would have expired in May of 2021. And the city charter states that the vacancies in the council arising for any cause shall be filled by a majority of vote of the remaining council members for the unexpired term or until the next general election. In this presentation, I'm going to outline that appointment process, and I'm also going to talk about, due to the unusual circumstances of COVID-19 and our normal May 2020 election being moved to November, we are also going to have a special election to fill the vacancy in November of 2020. So I'll go through some key dates so that you and the public can understand what that means for candidates who may want to file for that position. So in recent years, Waco has used this appointment process to fill vacancies that have been left on the council. In 2010, the council interviewed 7 candidates and selected Malcolm Duncan Jr. to fill the vacancy left by Mayor Jim Bush, who was elected mayor. In 2012, the council interviewed 4 candidates and selected Kyle Deaver to fill the vacancy left by Mayor Malcolm Duncan Jr., who was elected mayor. And in 2016, the council interviewed 9 candidates and selected council member Jim Holmes to fill the vacancy left by Mayor Kyle Deaver, who was elected mayor in that year. And most recently, in 2017, the council interviewed 7 candidates and selected Noah Jackson Jr. to fill the vacancy left by council member Wilbert Austin, who resigned at that time due to health issues. So the proposed process would work like this. There's a time frame for individuals to complete an application for consideration to fill the vacancy. And in the calendar that I'm proposing, we would begin that tomorrow, if the consensus is to move forward, June 3rd through the last day being June 17th of 2020. They'll file that application with my office. The applications are available tomorrow at 8 a.m. They'll be available on the City of Waco webpage and by calling the City Secretary's office. And the deadline to file that will be 5 p.m. on June 17th of 2020. Due to COVID-19 and obviously limited contact with individuals working towards that physical distancing, they can email that application completed to me, ehudson@wacotx.gov, or they can call and set up a time and arrangement where they can personally deliver that to me, and I'll meet them to receive their application during that filing period. We will quickly give notice tomorrow to the public about the process on all of our public information media with press releases, WCC 10, We will send out a press release and use our social media. And then depending on how many applications we receive, we will schedule 2 special council meetings to conduct interviews of the applicants. One tentatively for June 23rd and the other for June 30th. It's possible that we could do all the interviews in one special meeting, but scheduling 2 would allow you the flexibility to spread them apart if necessary. Again, just depending on how many applications you receive. Interviews will be conducted via Zoom, as far as I know, unless something changes. And they'll be streamed live on the Waco City Cable Channel and www.wccc.tv. And in the past, interviews have been, we've asked those who are being interviewed, the applicants, to do a 3 to 5 minute short presentation. And then council asks all the applicants the same questions so that you can have an opportunity to get to know the applicant and hear their reason for wanting to serve in this position. So again, like I mentioned earlier, due to the COVID-19, there's an unusual circumstance, and we will have to have our next general election, which would normally be in May, is now November 3rd. And so we will have to order a special election to fill the vacancy. And what we'd like the public to know is that if we order this election, probably July 21st is the city council meeting, then that would allow those who are interested to file a place on the ballot for District 4 beginning July 22nd, with the last day to file for a place on the ballot on August 20th of 2020. So there'll be a time frame for them to file, and then they will be on the November 3rd ballot for election. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. The appointed council member will serve until, if they're appointed in June, then they'll serve until November 2020, and then the individual elected in November will serve until May of 2021, and at that time there'll be an election for a full term of that district council member.
Okay, because that was my question. I was like, so does that change the cycle? But if they will, in that special election, just be serving from November of 2020 to May of 2021.
Yes, they're still
right.
They're just filling the unexpired term.
Okay, but
Right. You're correct in the way you're thinking about it, Andrea.
okay, because I was like unexpired term and special election. I mean, but it's still all the same. Okay, very good.
This is a really unfortunate situation. I think we may get applicants who really are only interested in filling that unexpired term. I think that's a question we should be asking. Do you intend to run again in November, and then do you intend to run again in May? I hate to ask any person to do 2 elections back to back in 6 months, plus go through the appointment process. But we've looked at this every way we can with an expert election attorney. And this is the way the Constitution and our charter work together to, that's the way it works. And we can't change the charter without doing a citywide election. So we are where we are. I think, it's so important that we go ahead and get this done quickly so that person will, for one thing, they may or may not get reelected in November. So we need them in that spot for as long as they can, representing District 4 with a person who now lives in District 4. And also because we're going to be going through the budget process, we need to get them seated so that they can be as involved in that process as possible, in my opinion.
Hey, Esmeralda, I know you. Sorry.
No, go.
I know you mentioned that people can fill out the application, or people that are interested can fill out the application and email it to you, but can the application be found online as well?
It will be found online first thing tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
Okay, so in essence, they could print it off online, fill it out, and then email it back to you.
Correct. Or they can call my office and I can email them a copy of the application. We'll do all we can considering our COVID-19 restrictions to make sure that they can have that application and then be able to file it with me in the time frame, either by email or meeting with me in person.
Okay, thank you so much.
This is Holmes. I'll just say that it's unfortunate for that new applicant. And it's also unfortunate for the council that Dylan has had to resign here. I know we'll have a party later and stuff for this, but I appreciate everything you've done on council, Dylan, and the guidance you've given me since I've been on council and friendship. You've been great, and hopefully we'll see you back on.
Thanks. I want to say how much I appreciate this staff and councils having to go through this. And, this is a circumstance that was unanticipated by me as well when my family began the plans to move and we went under contract to buy and sell homes. We never dreamed that this election would be postponed to November. I'll have more words to say later, but serving on this council has been one of the greatest honors of my life, and working with the city staff has been one of the greatest honors of my life. I'm excited for fresh, young, energetic ideas to come from whoever this council deems to appoint in this seat. I know that they're going to do a great job, and I know that this council, one of the great things is that I didn't have to worry about for a second if the city was going to be in good hands. We've got such a great staff and a great council that it's a real blessing that I can roll off and just know, well, the city's in great shape because of who's on this Zoom call right now. So I'm really thankful for that. And again, I hate these circumstances, and I'm sorry for the staff and council having to go through the motions of this because of me. I feel bad for that, but I do think this is the right course of action for my family. And like Jim said, I hope to be back with y'all again soon. And I'll have more words later, I'm sure, because I talked too much. But I did want to throw that out there for while this came up. So I appreciate all the efforts, and I'm excited to see who the applicants will be, and excited for District 4 to have new, fresh, good representation who I know is going to do good and represent this amazing, historic, diverse, spectacular district really well.
All right. Thank you, Dylan. And Esmeralda, thank you for the work that you've been doing on this. Jennifer, thank you too. We really appreciate the work that's gone into getting this all lined up. And I hope we will get some excellent applicants. I'm looking forward to seeing the list. So thank you.
And in the meantime, I'll just interject. Dylan, welcome to my district. I look forward to all of the complaints and suggestions you have for me and how I can do a better job serving you.
I told John that he better buckle up because I'm about to be blowing up his email about every pothole I see. But apparently, since he's not running again, he says that he doesn't have to worry about responding to it.
That'll be fun. Yeah, but thank you.
All right, maybe we should move to the next item.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Mayor and Council, our first work session item is discussion of planning public hearing agenda items. Clint Peters, our Director of Planning and Inspections. Clint.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. We do just have the one public hearing for our subdivision plats. We do have two plats that are from the same developer, WB Development. The first one being the final plat and construction plans of Park Meadows Addition Phase 4. This is a large single-family subdivision out in the Ritchie Road corridor. Phase 1 has already been built. Phase 2 and 3 are under construction now, and then this is Phase 4 of 5. It does contain 139 single-family lots. And you can see here how it fits in with the whole preliminary plat. Ritchie Road being on the right hand of your screen, and then the areas in yellow being Phase 4 for that plat. And then the next one is adjacent to this from the same developer that connects into it is the Park Meadows South Addition Phase 1. Again, adjacent to the south of Park Meadows, original Park Meadows development. Has street connections to this, 230 lots, and it is the first phase of 4 along Ritchie Road, and then connection points into Park Meadows Addition. And both these plats have been reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission with the plats and the construction plans for both additions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on these.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Clint. Mayor and Council, our next work session is work session 2020-349. This is a discussion of the fiscal year 2019-20 year-end budget and preliminary fiscal year 2020-21 budget, including discussion of capital improvement program, impact on debt service portion of the property tax rate. And I've got leading the discussion Isaiah Preza, our Assistant Director of Finance, also Janice Andrews, our Chief Financial Officer, and Paul Kane, Assistant City Manager. Laura Cox, our Budget Manager, has also been involved in this. And I just want to say before they get started, they've done a great job of putting some numbers together, some options for the council to consider, especially as we face uncertain revenue times here. And I think they've done a great job of pulling together a very conservative approach to this budget, which at this point in time, before we have a couple more months of sales tax numbers, it's very important for us to have a very conservative budget. So I want to compliment them in advance. And with that, I'm going to ask Isaiah to get started. Thank you, Isaiah.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. In today's workshop, we'll be covering our budget summaries, an update on the tax rate, and an update on capital financing as well as debt capacity. The first item that we'd want to address is the completed and planned discussions comparing last fiscal year to this fiscal year. For this slide illustrates our completed discussions. The changes from this year include a preliminary general fund financial update that we've already done back in May, including property tax and sales tax discussion, and also a general fund assignment discussion, including rating agencies and reserves. This year, we do have a slight change. We'll be bringing you outside agencies at the end of June. Yeah, man. For our planned discussions, this year, we are going to have additional discussions starting with today's work session. We'll be going over the general fund, an update on utilities funds, excluding the rates. As a reminder, those rates are done by our rate consultants. It's our goal by the end of June to come back with the utility funds with rates. Discussion on the convention center fund and tax supported debt service. In our next work session, we'll be bringing you a budget update, including special revenue funds and an update on key dates. And at the end of June, at our budget and audit meeting, again, we'll bring back the utility funds with rate models and discuss other enterprise funds such as golf and zoo. And then we'll also have an initial discussion on tax-supported CIP, our fee schedule, and outside agencies. And then in July, during our budget and audit, we'll come back with our budget update and changes in financials. Starting with our financials, this is a quick overview. This shows our FY20 adopted budget of $361 million. This is by source of funding. So it's important to point out that the majority of our source of funding is charges for services and taxes. In regards to charges for services, that's really driven in the utilities funds by our rates. And then in taxes, that's really driven by the general fund with property tax and sales tax. On the expenditure side, these numbers also reflect FY20 adopted budget. Citywide salary and benefits are our #1 expense here at 34%. Moving on to debt, a quick overview on debt. This stat graph illustrates our outstanding debt at the beginning of FY20. It was about $460 million at that point. In red, you'll see our general debt, and then in orange and yellow, you'll see our wastewater and water debt, followed by solid waste and TIF. The revenue sources that pay off this debt for general fund, that's driven by property tax revenue. For water and wastewater, that debt is paid off by the rates that they charge in charges for services, and solid waste debt is paid off by collections and landfill activity. This stat graph illustrates our annual debt service from FY19 to FY21. As you can see, our general debt portion at the bottom red has increased year over year. The 13.1 million amount that you see there includes the FY20 bond issuance. This area graph here shows our general fund debt service payments with our planned 2024 issuance. It is important to note from FY21 to FY24, we're anticipating, or there will be an additional 123 million in debt planned to be issued. The high point of this graph is in FY 2025, and that debt is 21.3 million. So a little bit of an update on this graph. The bond issuance past FY24 here is not contemplated in this graph, which is why the upper limits of the orange graph mirror the limits of the currently outstanding debt service in red. Moving on into the enterprise funds, as a reminder, all our enterprise funds really work as private businesses, as all funds charge a fee for their services. In today's discussion, we'll be focusing on water, solid waste, wastewater, WMARS, and convention center. At the end of June, we'll come back and focus on the other enterprise funds, including golf, zoo, Ranger Hall of Fame, and transit. All right, and I'd like to pull up the income statements, starting with the water fund. So before I get into the income statements, throughout all these income statements, you'll see interest on investments decreasing for each of the funds. As of our latest data, the federal effective tax rate, effective federal fund rate was at 0%. In addition, our tax pool rates have fallen, as well as our combined fund portfolio yield. Staff will continue to monitor the current conditions, and those numbers may change once we come back to you on the proposed budget. It's also important to note, as we talk about the FY21 revenues, this includes no rates. Again, those rates will be done by our rate consultant, and we'll come back to you at the end of the month. All right, so for water fund, the way I'll go through these income statements is in two phases. I'll go into the FY20 and those projections, and then I'll transition into FY21. So for FY20, we do anticipate, as we stated, a decrease in revenue for interest. There's a slight increase in other due to sell of scrap. And then we're also delaying the transfers in from Golf Fund of 1.225 million. So for FY20 overall, we're anticipating a loss of reduction of 1.289, really driven by the transfers in Golf Fund. In order to offset that loss in revenue, we are reducing capital and discussing with the utility staff. This reduction in capital shouldn't have a detrimental impact on their water operations. We're also anticipating salary savings at year end. And in both the water and the wastewater fund, there is a proposed amendment reducing the interdepartmental billings for engineering billings, each for $100,000. Moving into FY21, again, reduction in interest, delaying the transfers in from Golf Fund. And then on the FY21, some of the requests that make up the base adjustments increase include an increase in purchase professional technical services for computer services such as cloud hosting, increase in maintenance for pump station overhaul, computer services, and meter maintenance, increase in supplies due to increase in chemical cost, and also an increase in debt payment of $887,418. Overall, for FY21, our preliminary numbers show a drawdown of fund balance of $2.5 million.
I'd like to add before we move on that as the rate consultants are looking at these funds, not only will they be looking at covering that shortfall of 2.4 million, they will also be looking at what's required to do the debt coverage, and that takes into account the net revenue that's available to provide coverage for debt service. And we look through the rate model using around the 1.25 times coverage. By doing that, we would need to have coverage of an additional 4.9 million. So not only would we be covering the 19.7, we would have an additional 25% on top of that. So under that scenario, not only will we have to cover the 2.5, we'll be needing to cover an additional 4.9. Our financial policies indicate at least a 1.1 coverage, and that would require an additional 1.9 million. So as we're doing the rate studies, not only will be coming up with break even, we'll also have to have provisions within those revenues to provide those net coverages. That's very important. It's looked at by our rating agencies and looking at our bond rating for those debt portions that are allocated to utilities that are considered to be self-supporting debt.
Hey, Janice or Isaiah, just real quick on the 1.2 million from the golf course to the water fund, just what exactly does that encompass?
Those are actually some older advances that were made from water to golf, as well as some water billings. Before we started doing the well true up, we had some older water bills. And so it's some advances that we show in the financials as advances from water to golf, as well as some account receivables through the utility billing, as well as some calculations we do at the end of the year for the audit. So they have built up over a number of years, and this year we had anticipated having available funds to be able to clear those up. But with COVID, we decided to delay that. Sure.
Why was the water fund advancing money to the golf fund?
It was at a time when we took back over the golf course operations, and we were trying to work out the payment on the well, and there was it goes back a number of years.
Just with it involves the well water and the interactions and interplay between that and our water fund.
Yes, sir. And we do show those as advances, long-term liabilities in those funds, and a long-term receivable.
Okay, thank you.
This is Holmes, and I just again, Janice, you know, I've always had trouble with GAAP accounting, which was my world for 30 years, versus fund accounting, and so I get confused when we look at these kind of departmental statements. The real true revenue is the operating revenue. The real true expenditure are the departmental expenditures, I would say less CapEx. And then I get confused where I see interdepartmental billing as a revenue, interdepartmental billing as an expense. And is there any way we get more detail on the like interdepartmental and transfers in, transfers out? Somehow get more detail on that, on those items. Because the other ones make sense. Revenues, you got charges for services, other interest on investments. What does it cost for that cost center? Salaries, right down the list. It gets really kind of murky when we have, and as John pointed one out, I mean, why were we doing that golf thing? And which makes sense when you can explain it. But again, I know this is fund accounting. This is how it's got to look. But maybe for the old timers here that know more about GAAP, give me some more information on these vague interdepartmental numbers.
Yes, sir. I'm right there with you. I understand. We will get you a detail of interdepartmental. Of course, engineering, we have that as an internal service fund, and it's being billed to water, wastewater, and general fund. That's one of the larger ones. But we also have the water fund that does the billing and collection for wastewater, WMRs, and solid waste. But we'll get you a detail of those because it's in several different funds. We'll be happy to provide that.
Good. Yeah, and then the other thing is the cost allocation overhead. Is that parent overhead being allocated amongst the enterprises?
It's actually an indirect cost plan, and it really takes into account services such as finance, legal, city secretary, purchasing, those type of departments that provide services to all the funds. And we actually have a third party that does an in-depth cost allocation plan for us. We don't charge that to all of the enterprise funds, and we don't charge it to all the grants, but the utility funds are considered as self-supporting, and we do charge them for their indirect cost, and it's related to all the services that are provided to them.
Yeah, makes sense.
And that money goes back to the general fund.
Right. Okay.
Hey, Isaiah or Janice, this is Hector. I have a question about the savings on salaries for FY20. I know the savings we talked about on, you're looking at a savings. How many jobs is that specifically in this department that the savings will encounter? And the second part of that question is, do you foresee us not filling those positions have an impact on the services that we're providing our community?
Actually, again, those savings are our estimate based on where we are right now. They are taking into account some vacancies, and the departments do work with management in filling vacancies as they're able to make sure we have sufficient staff to continue operations if needed.
So we're not anticipating or expecting a change in services that we're providing to our community with some of these vacancies or some of these savings that we're trying to get.
Not in the water fund.
No, sir.
Not in this particular fund. And
Yes.
like she alluded, we always have vacancies. And sometimes we have a little more turnover than at other times, but it may cause us to work a little bit more overtime to make sure that we meet the maintenance standards of the system. But yes, we take care of the system, and we try to make sure that our service to the citizens is not sacrificed in any way.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Oh, and just one more real quick follow-up, just make sure I heard you right, Janice. So we're budgeting right now a $2.5 million shortfall for next fiscal year in this fund. And you said we're going to have to find, and that'll be drawn down from reserves. And we'll need to find another 5, you said, to maintain our reserve ratio?
To keep that 1.25 coverage, yes, sir. But that will all be taken into account as they do the rate studies.
Okay.
All right, moving into the wastewater fund. For the wastewater fund, there's just a slight increase in FY20 projections for revenue. And that's just driven by the realized interest income of $138,000 that you see here. We're leaving it flat for the remainder of the year. On the expenditure side, just like the water fund, we do anticipate savings due to vacancies. The other $471,000 here is a reflection of the city share of billing revenues underruns from the WMARS billing. And like we stated earlier, this $100,000 in reduction is due to the engineering billing. That is a proposed amendment. In FY21, reducing the interest income here, a slight reduction in transfers in from WMARS. Some of the FY21 requests for the wastewater fund include an increase of 1.1 million that's included in this number here for WMAR's FY21 preliminary billings, and an increase in debt service payments of $77,630. Our preliminary numbers show a drawdown of fund balance of 1.02 million. And then to echo Janice's point on the fund balance does need to cover a debt service in future years. Moving on to the WMARS fund, we are anticipating revenues to come in under budget. That is driven by a decrease in charges for services due to a decrease in flows. Staff will also adjust capital expenditures to offset some of that loss in revenue. And just like the water fund, speaking with staff, it shouldn't be a detrimental impact on their operations. We are anticipating savings in this fund as well. For 21, the only change from our beginning base budget is the interest. And then FY21 expenditures requests include increase in maintenance for non-potable pump can replacements and additional treatment plant maintenance, and a new debt service payment of $337,271 from FY20 bond issuance. So for WMARS, our preliminary numbers show a drawdown in fund balance of 1.65 million.
And if I might add, fiscal year 20 was the first year that we did actually do a separate allocation of the bond issue specifically for WMARS.
This here is a solid waste fund. For the solid waste fund for FY20, we are anticipating revenues to come in over budget. That is driven by increase in landfill activity. In addition, solid waste staff has recommended some potential savings for FY20. Those savings include an in-service study that can be done in-house and a reduction in temporary help, and then a slight reduction in travel and training of $66,800 for other purchase services. For 21, we're adjusting interest income as well for this fund. And some of the FY21 requests include increase in purchase professional technical services for monitoring and routeware monthly fees, and then an increase in supplies for polycart and dumpster purchases. And we also have a capital budget here of $1.01 million. That's for 4 solid waste trucks. For the solid waste fund, we are anticipating increase in fund balance of $173,318. Moving on to the convention service fund. Now, this is the first enterprise fund that we'll be discussing that really had a negative COVID impact, and that negative impact is reflected in the hot tax. As you see here, staff is anticipating a reduction in revenue in the amount of $1.8 million. In addition, as they are not able to have normal business activity in the closure of the Tourism Information Center, we're anticipating a loss in charges for services and net merchandise sales for these amounts here. Overall, for FY20, we're anticipating a loss in revenue of $2.5 million. Convention center staff has done their due diligence and has recommended some savings to offset those lost in revenues. Some of those savings include a reduction in purchase professional technical services due to business closure activities, a reduction in maintenance and supplies related to daily upkeep of facilities, and a delay in capital of $350,000, and that's really going to affect their brick and mortar enhancements that they do at the convention center. So for FY20, you see this negative $2.2 million really drawing down their fund balance of 4.3. Moving on into FY21.
Hey, Isaiah, just real quick on that.
Yes, sir.
And sorry, I was looking at this one right before this meeting, and so if you don't have it, y'all don't have an answer to this right now, you can get back to me. But the CVB Commission at this time last year was given a financial report that was contemplating the budget for fiscal year 20, and on that one, and part of my concern and consternation about pulling the $1.5 million out for the HVAC from this. Was on that report a year ago showed that we anticipated the beginning fund balance for this fiscal year, and this was 1 year ago, of the beginning fund balance of $2.6 million, and this report shows it was 4.3. Can you just kind of tell me how where that kind of jump came from? Because that changes, because the report we had, and the last time I had seen the actual fund balance report, had shown that we had anticipated that HVAC draw, bringing the fund balance down to only $500,000 because we started at 2.6 million. But this report shows us starting at 4.3, which gives me a little more comfort on paying for it out of this. But I'd like to know where that discrepancy came from what was projected a year ago, the 2.6 to the 4.3 that we ended up with.
Councilmember, we'll be happy to provide an audited financial statement to you. And we did have higher performance in revenue, so they were able to add to their reserves at the end of 19. So we'll be happy to provide an audited statement showing you that.
All right, thank you. But all that to say is that this, so I was looking that we had 2.6 and we're pulling 1.5 out for the HVAC and some others, and the 200,000 that the general fund takes now each year. And so drawing that reserve down, but we're starting at a much higher number than I thought we were starting at. Which tells me that there's a little more, tells me and the commission that there's a little more flexibility on this fund and the reserves than I thought we had.
Yes, sir. And
that's a good thing.
Yes, sir. I might just mention on the cost allocation, we have started to charge a portion of indirect costs to the convention fund, that $200,000. We had hoped to gradually increase that up to actual, but because of COVID, we're keeping it at the $200,000. But again, in the convention center, This fund is not paying the debt service related to their capital improvements. That's being handled through property tax, and also not payment in lieu in taxes and other type expenses that funds such as the utility funds are being charged.
Sure.
I'll just jump in on this one. Of all the enterprise funds we've looked at so far, this one being the last today anyway, this one seems the most optimistic, I will say, from the revenue perspective, where we're, given all the conditions. This is one where as we get more information this month and next month, we may want to adjust that. Budgeted at 5.6 million versus a 4 million estimation for this year. I mean, I'm optimistic too, but I'm going to be realistic about this. But we'll have more and better information, I guess, in the coming 45 days.
Yes, sir. And to that point, all these funds will definitely adjust numbers as we get more information. And then, yeah, and with the hot tax, we may need to adjust that number even further.
Thanks.
All right. FY21, kind of the same theme as FY20. We anticipate the COVID to continue having an impact on hot tax. We're reducing our beginning base budget by about 18%. That amount is $881,000. And the same theme for FY20, convention staff has recommended some budget cuts in order to offset that revenue. Those budget cuts include cuts in purchase professional technical services with a reduction in temporary help and special services, and a reduction in supplies for tables and chairs. And at this moment, there are no capital requests. The convention center staff does have a list prepared. If the economy recovers faster than anticipated, then we would come back and ask for those requests to be part of the FY21 budget. So in FY21, we're anticipating a drawdown in fund balance of $285,000 for the convention center fund. And then on the general fund, I did want to do a quick update. From our previous budget and audit discussion, staff was given the task to identify any additional potential savings that we could identify within their budgets. And staff has done their due diligence and identify some savings in salary and benefits, in purchase professional technical services, and that includes cuts for events for special services and equipment. Those events can include Brazos Night, Pints in the Park, and the cancellation of Fourth on the Brazos. And in supplies, we also have a reduction of here for office supplies. In FY21, finance staff continues to vet and review the departmental requests submitted in terms of affordability. And I do want to remind Mayor and Council that the city sales tax collection will be received on Wednesday, June 10th. This collection will reflect April's activity and will assist us on the projecting year-end financials. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Paul Kane.
I had one question on that last slide. If you put that back up.
Yes, sir.
Please. And I know that the revenue part, I think, is more part of the next part of the presentation. So I'm not going to comment on sales tax, property taxes. I think it's part of a very thorough discussion we're about to have. It's more on the salaries and wages and employee benefits and how we budget those numbers in 2021. And I know that we have 1,500 employees, give or take. There's always 200 or 150-ish, 10% of the work staff it's not filled, we're not paying. We budget to the full employment. And I just want to consider that 150 that has been floating since I've been on council. And I know it's always different jobs and it's not the same thing, we've been looking for 5 years, but I really want to sharpen our pencil on where that 68.2 million of salaries and wage employment goes to 69.3. Is that representing a full 1,500 person employment? Is that, because I know the way a lot of private sector businesses do it, you calculate the 5% unemployment that you have in there, and that's your budget. You don't budget to the entire fully employed amount. I know part of this is, beating budget and all like that. But I would like for us to sharpen our pencil on that salaries and wages. And I know that I'm not sure what that 796 represents, maybe a little bit of that activity. But again, 68.2, is that or 68.2 over here in the beginning base budget, really 69.3, work in process budget. Is that full employment for all 1,500 employees? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Well, it's a combination of multiple factors. At one point during our budget process, we have to freeze our personnel and attempt to budget for the next fiscal year. And during that process, we capture each employee's salary at that point. In addition to that, if there are vacancies, which there will always be, we budget at midpoint, and that really adjusts the number. Also, we also budget salary savings. So net salary savings is about $870,000 in FY21. So we do anticipate some savings throughout the year. And so really a city this size, we do the best we can to budget for what we can, but we'll always have vacancies. And depending on how fast we can fill those vacancies, that vacancy number can vary year by year.
Yeah, I want to address more of and I appreciate that. Let's just look at it, because we've had a vacant job out there for 3 years at some point, or I don't know, and maybe it's 8 months. At some point, you don't need it anymore. So let's get that off the budget, and maybe we have 10 of those, maybe we have 50 of those. I don't know. But I just want us to be very careful on how we budget that number from year to year, because it shows here even this year we're ahead of budget by 800,000, and I know that's I don't know, intuitively it seems that is because we haven't filled all the positions that we budgeted to. But there's got to be a number where we budget to an assumption of filled or non-filled positions. Maybe that's half of them, like we said.
Yes, sir.
And to get back off of that, what Councilmember Holmes was saying, if we've been able to operate thus far without those positions, then possibly it is now is the time to look at them and say, well, we've been able to do what we can with those positions that aren't filled. And so maybe we do get to the point where they're just taken off of the budget. So I have to agree with him there.
Yeah, and council members, I want to say we do that. And we do have I think we normally project a 2% salary savings. That's what we've done in the past. And then we look at the vacancies that we have. So, but I think what we have to be careful of, because we're projecting a 2% salary savings, not every position we save or eliminate or not fill is a true salary savings, because we've already projected some of that salary savings over here with the 2%. So we have to be careful about double dipping on that, and then finding ourselves with not enough money in our salary budget. But what y'all brought up, we try to look at that every year. We try to look at every vacant position. Our HR department produces a list of how long those positions have been vacant, and I wish it was simple as we could go in and take some positions out that have been vacant for a while, but in my experience, it never is. But we do look at that every year, and if we've got positions that we can take out that are vacant and we can take them out, we're going to take them out.
That's all I have. Paul, go ahead.
Got it.
Okay. Workers' comp plan.
The budget just went up. Go to the next one, Esmeralda. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I want to echo Wiley and thank Janice and Isaiah and all the work that they're doing for us on the budget and work left to be done, but want to compliment them. All right, let's talk a little bit about the property tax rate. The total rate has held at just right at 77 cents since fiscal year 2014. The last 5 years are shown on this chart. And as you know, within the total rate, there's two portions. the operations and maintenance or O&M rate, as we like to say, and the interest and sinking rate or debt rate. And those vary each year, and the debt rate certainly varies based on the outstanding debt. For fiscal year 21, the debt rate will need to increase about 1.4 cents to meet the city's debt obligations. And if the total rate of that 77 cents is maintained, of course, that's going to require us to shift 1.4 pennies from operations to debt in order to meet that debt service next year.
And remind us, a penny equates to how much in dollars?
A penny is about 900,000.
It's getting close to a million.
Close to a million.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. The next slide, I want to talk a little bit about SB2. As you know, the legislature has limited the city's ability to raise revenue. This table presents what's a very simplified illustration of how cities are impacted. You'll recall the previous law established what's called the effective tax rate, or the rate that was required to generate the same amount of revenue as received the previous year from properties that were taxed in both years. Under SB2, that effective tax rate has gone away, and it's now replaced with something called the O&M no new revenue rate. So that rate for fiscal year 21 is estimated at 65.24 cents. And under SB2, the city can't raise property tax revenue more than 3.5% without an election. So in Waco's case, the city could increase the O&M rate about 2.3 cents to 67.52 cents and remain within SB2 requirements. And that would generate about $2.5 million more in additional revenue for operations, but it would increase the total tax rate to around 79.9 cents. This year's a little unique. Within SB2, there was a provision to deal with emergencies. And due to the COVID pandemic and the governor and presidential emergency orders, SB2 gives council the ability to increase revenues by up to 8%, increasing the O&M portion of the rate to 5.2 cents to 70.46 cents, generating $5 million in additional revenue, and that would raise the total rate to 82 cents. SB2 also has a provision that allows cities to bank their unused increments over a 3-year period, and the increment being the difference between the adopted rate and the voter approved rate, which is 3.5% in a normal year, 8% in an emergency year. So supposing council did not wish to raise the total rate due to shifting the 1.4 cents to debt, the city would adopt an O&M rate very close to the no new rate. That no new rate, as you see, is about 65.23 cents. So this would mean that the city would bank almost all of the 3.5% this year. Theoretically, over a 3-year period, if you were to do that, you would bank 10.5%, 3.5% a year over the 3-year period. So theoretically, a council could raise in the 3rd year the rate 10.5%. Now, as I mentioned, there's the 8% ability due to the emergency order. You can also bank that amount as well. Now, to do that, it's our understanding, I'm talking with our legal staff, that the city council would have to pass a resolution requesting the county tax assessor collector to calculate the O&M rate for us at an 8% increase. So that would require formal action by the council to request that 8% calculation. It would not bind the city to raise taxes 8%, but it would be public action for the council to do so. Staff will need some direction from the council on this, because that action has to be taken, I believe, Janice, in early July. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So we're looking at that action coming up fairly soon here. So we need direction from you there. We assume, I guess, the council's preference is to keep the total rate at the 77 cents it is today. But if there's any interest in increasing our bank to 8%, we need to have a formal resolution by early July to get that done.
But we don't need to take action to bank the 3.5?
No, sir.
Okay.
It's my understanding that's built in the statute.
So do you need to have, before July, do you need to have the exact amounts that we're banking, or do you just say we're banking the whole? Because obviously we want to bank those increases.
I think our increase is projected right now. Councilmember Holmes projected at about a 0.5% increase, so we would bank around 3%. Of course, we won't know exactly how much that is until the certified roll comes out in July. So we would bank around 3%, let's say, this year of the 3.5 available to us.
Okay.
All right, the following two charts or donut charts illustrate the general fund operations and maintenance finances as contained in the current adopted budget. This chart specifically deals with revenues, or total revenues in the general fund of $149 million. Property and sales taxes comprise 71% of the budget, with an additional 13% coming from transfers into the fund. Some of those transfers we were talking about earlier, such as pilots, overhead, interdepartmental billing, and the gross receipts tax. So you can see that those two together comprise about 84% of our general fund revenues. On the next slide, looking at general fund expenditures, again, slightly higher because we had a planned drawdown of fund balance for some one-time expenses and capital. This chart addresses those expenses. You can see that just about almost 2/3 of the general fund expenses are comprised of personnel costs in the form of salaries and wages and benefits. Nearly 3/4 of the general fund budget is in personnel costs, transfers out to support other departments, and cash funding of CIP, such as the Better Streets Waco program. And on the following slides, we want to talk to you about the general fund debt capacity and our CIP. This slide summarizes the current planned CIP. We are in year 2 of the $152 million plan over the 5-year period, with approximately $123 million in bonds remaining to be issued. And that annual issuance is shown in the blue columns on the graph. The projected amount of debt to be sold each year is shown in the blue, over the life of the program, total debt service is in the orange columns and expected to increase $10.3 million or 93% over the life of the program. You'll see the tax rate impact there shown on the gray line, and that total is just under 7 cents over the life of the program. And we've talked a little bit about the pennies shifting over. The 7 cents are shifted from the O&M rate to the debt rate. And the average shift per year is about 1.4 cents. All of these rate calculations are based on a 3.5% growth in the taxable assessed value, or TAV, after exemptions and after the TIF is removed. And just want to note that this year the TIF valuation on our preliminary rolls increased substantially, about 30%, which removed more than $150 million in our TAV calculation over to the TIF. So TIF can have a significant impact on our ability to tax other properties in the city. The INS, or debt rate projections, as I said, are based on the 3.5% valuation increase discussed earlier. This slide shows the impact on the rate based on various valuation growth scenarios. So should the growth in valuation be higher than 3.5%, let's say 7%, as shown in the purple columns, you can see that the higher valuation reduces the amount of property tax in terms of cents required to serve the debt. And over the life of the program, looking at the purple column, it reduced it around 2.24 cents. Conversely, if the growth rate were lower than 3.5%, let's say 1%, as shown in the blue, you can see that the rate actually rises, and over the life of the program would be, I think, 9 cents higher overall instead of 7. So you can see how the valuation affects how many pennies we're shifting from one to the other. And that kind of leads us into what's the effect of the planned CIP on our operations, our O&M, and property tax revenue. So we're going to get into that here in some detail. As mentioned, at the 3.5% valuation, as shown in the orange columns here, operational revenue for this fiscal year 21 is projected to be right around $300,000. And then it goes up slightly and then begins a trend downward over time as the pennies are shifted. As valuation growth dips below that 3.5%, you can see in the blue columns there that the general fund is actually losing money, and in the projections, if we were at 1% valuation growth, which it admittedly is quite low, and Waco has not experienced anything like 1%, but if it were in that range, you can see how much money would be coming out of the general fund, essentially from a revenue standpoint, property tax revenue standpoint, and shifted over to debt. So if we took that information from the previous slide, it becomes more concerned when we look at the actual revenue historically. The orange line shows the adopted O&M rate from fiscal years 2015 to 2020, and the projected rate from fiscal year 21 to 2025 under the planned CIP, with the penny shifting occurring and the valuation growth being around 3.5%. From 15 to 19, we had strong growth in valuation. You can see shown in blue there that the average, it went from 6 to 8, 7, so we had really strong growth during those years. And we also had an increasing O&M rate, and those combined to generate a significant amount of property tax revenue. Declining TAV and declining O&M rate in the following years has obviously an impact on operation and on operating revenues. So going forward beyond fiscal year 2021, using our forecasted valuation growth of 3.5%, there's only a slight increase in 2022, and then the trend turns downward in O&M revenue growth. This slide turns those percentages into dollars. This shows the amount of increase year over year in dollars for both property and sales tax revenues since 15. Fiscal year 16 to 20, operational revenue from property taxes, shown in blue, increased an average of $4.3 million each year. For fiscal years 21 through 25, that amount drops to an average of $877,000 annually due to shifting pennies and lower valuation increases. For fiscal 21, staff projects a $3 million decrease in budgeted sales tax revenue, shown in gray, and approximately $300,000 in property tax revenue. Looking at fiscal years 21 through 25, we're forecasting a 3% growth in sales tax, hoping that we'll begin to build back to where we were in annual sales tax growth. Note that in 19, the property tax and sales tax totaled almost $7.5 million. And the projected growth in fiscal year 25 from both sources is about $1.8 million. Similar to the previous slide, this slide looks at sales tax and property tax revenue growth on an annual basis as a percentage. You'll see from 16 to 20, growth in the two revenue sources averaged about 6.5% a year, a total of $29 million over the term. And you compare those percentages to the projected growth for fiscal years 21 through 25, where the annual growth averages about 1.1% in a declining trend, with just under $9 million in growth over the period, about half of that coming from property taxes. I think all of this really comes home in this graph here that I understand in Waco history is called a gator graph. But this graph shows really, I think, drives home the real world impact of this. The police and fire expenses, their total budgets are shown in the gold and orange line. They're forecasted at a growth rate of 2% a year. And our projected operational property tax revenue under the current CIP with the penny shifting is shown in blue. Currently, property taxes pay for 97% of police and fire budgets, requiring about $1.9 million in revenue from other sources to fund the two departments. By fiscal year 2025, property taxes are projected to account for 94% of the two departments' budgets and would require $4.6 million in revenue from other sources to fund those budgets. So I think these trends and looking at these numbers cause us to look at our CIP plan a little differently, and we want to show you what might be an alternate CIP possibility with this idea of operating revenues in mind. So the alternate CIP amounts are presented here. You can compare this slide to slide 19. I'm sorry, they're numbered differently here, but we'll get that information to you. I'm sorry, I've forgotten we were going to change our numbering. But the current plan contemplates issuing $123 million over the next 4 years. This plan would reduce that amount to just under $69 million. And the annual amounts are shown in blue. Over the life of the plan, the total issuance of $97 million increases debt service shown in orange, just under 5.7 million or 52% over the life of the program. The penny shifting would be reduced from just under 7 cents to just over 3 cents, and that's shown in the gray line. These calculations are based on the same 3.5% growth in tax valuations. And I think it's important at this point to say that these amounts are certainly estimates. They're not set in stone. And each year, staff should conduct a financial analysis of our valuation growth, other revenue growth, and propose a debt issuance in keeping with the City Council's goals for tax rate management, operational revenues, and infrastructure needs. So we're going to look at kind of the impact of this alternate program going forward in time, and this is related to the charts that we saw below earlier. Note that under the alternative CIP at 3.5% valuation growth in orange, revenue increases each year. And if we should fall below 3.5%, we see 1% shown here in blue, that there's just minimal amount of impact to the general fund in terms of loss of revenue going forward. Similarly, this is a comparison to the other slides that you've seen. The penny shifting certainly occurs at a lesser scale. You see the tax rate is shown in orange there. The slope past fiscal year 21 is certainly flatter under the proposed plan than under the current plan. With for example, in 2025, the tax rate under the current plan was around 59.68 cents in fiscal year 2025, and it's up to 63 cents here. So where the current plan would reduce property tax revenue growth for fiscal year 21-25, the alternate plan would provide some annual growth of about 3% in property tax revenue per year to the general fund. Looking at it in real dollars, the amount of increase in year-over-year dollars is shown on this slide here. You'll see that prior to 21, tax revenue growth averaged around 4.3 million, as we discussed earlier. Under the alternate CIP for fiscal 21 through 25, the projected growth of revenue increases from 877,000 to 1.7 million annually. And as an example, in fiscal year 25, the growth in property tax and sales taxes is projected at 3.3 million, almost double the 1.8 under the current CIP plan. This slide shows the percentage of annual revenue growth. Note that under the alternate CIP, the growth rate holds steady at 3% beyond fiscal year 21, with a rising average of 1.9% versus the declining 1.1% we saw earlier. Forecasted property tax revenues almost doubled from 4.4 million under the current CIP to 8.7, and total revenues increased from 9 million to just under 13. This last slide is really a summary of all that you have seen before into one table on one page. Note that the difference between the two plans and operational property tax revenue, as the city moves forward, operational costs will increase. If we are to achieve many of the forward-thinking goals and strategic initiatives the council has for Waco while continuing to provide basic services to a growing city, costs to provide basic services will increase due to wage and salary inflation, as well as inflationary increases in fuel, contractual services, etc. Staff recommends balancing our debt issuances in a manner that continues to provide increasing property tax revenue to meet these demands while maintaining a strong capital improvement program. And while this presentation has focused on the revenue side of things, we certainly recognize the importance of becoming more efficient on the expenditure side of the budget to reduce expenses and minimize future increases. It's an ongoing effort for each department, and certainly an ongoing effort for the manager's office and the budget team as well. So next step going forward, with regard to the CIP, I think one thing we want to hopefully get from the council today is some sense of your direction on the parameters for our future debt issuances and the balance between debt and operating revenues. This direction will help us to establish debt capacity for each year and then present council with the list of projects to be undertaken each year. With regard to the general fund, we are, as we talked about earlier, working diligently to refine our expenditures, specifically in the areas of salaries and benefits, fuel, utilities, and other accounts. On the revenue side, we continue to examine sales tax revenue in detail, as was discussed earlier. We are optimistic the current year will end ahead of some of the initial dire COVID-19 predictions, but even if those, if we finish better than what we had thought before, it's still going to be multi-millions of dollars less than was budgeted for this year. As mentioned previously, we do not expect to finalize the sales tax projections for the current year or next year until we receive the July payment, which will be from our May sales. Then last, on the enterprise fund, as Janice and Isaiah talked about earlier, we are working through the expenditure and revenue projections, and we're turning to rate making right now, and we expect to get those to you in June of this year. So at this point, Council, that's all we had in the this portion of the work session, but would certainly welcome any questions or comments that Council has.
I'll kick it off. Thank you. I mean, I think this was very thorough and really kind of gives a good picture and gives us some information that we can work with in understanding kind of what the landscape is we're looking at in this current economic climate. One of the things I'd like to see before I can really make a decision is exactly what projects, I mean, because that's, we're talking about cutting the CIP in half. And so I'd like to see what projects are being foregone or delayed or reduced. And I know that a lot of that's going to come out of the street fund. And so based on that alternate strategy, the lower one, I'd like to get an idea of what that does to our overall pavement condition index. If we do what looks to be 12 to 15 versus the 30 we were talking about, I think that would be helpful, kind of just to help get that conversation started.
Sure.
And then the only other thing for me, at least here initially, and I'll let others talk. So help me game this, because when we mentioned earlier about the 3.5% versus banking the 8%. I mean, valuations, property valuations at the moment anyway, seem to be holding up, but I mean, it's still kind of early in all of this. If say next year our rolls come back and valuations have dropped, say 5%, I mean, that would end up in just a natural reduction in our O&M rate, because we'd only be allowed to increase by that 3.5, right? So if we don't have that 8 banked, we can only, if values go down 5, then just the no new revenue rate would be higher than the 3.5 that we'd be allowed to go up. Am I thinking about that right? And so I just want to make sure, I'm just trying to, so that would cause an even further reduction in our rate and less revenue in that standpoint.
I think the way I understand it, and SB2, of course, is new to all of us. It just went into effect this year.
Yeah.
If we did have a valuation decrease like that of 5%, under the no new revenue calculation, you can, essentially the O&M no new revenue rate is the rate required to generate the same amount of revenue as you had the year before. So there would be a rise, just like under the old effective tax rate. The effective tax rate would go up based on the devaluation of the base. Then you can only, the 3.5% applies to revenues above what you earned in the previous year.
Oh, okay.
So you would have.
So
go ahead.
In that instance, we could adopt a rate that is 3.5% higher than the one we currently have, just to get to that no new revenue dollar level, and then we can't go 3.5% above that.
Yes, sir. That's
okay.
my understanding.
Okay.
And I'll verify that, but that is my understanding.
Yeah. That intuitively makes sense, but thanks. Okay.
All right, I'll jump in here, and my comments follow some of John's. Again, first of all, great report. I love the process, the thought process that went into this, and just how it flows. Very good. And I know that the CIP projects is where obviously I think all of us had thought, we set a very ambitious growth, or a normal growth pattern until just the last couple months. And so I think that's the obvious place where we need to be looking to review the projects, if you will. And the infrastructure projects that make up most of that, I guess all of that, create jobs, and they say like roughly 25 per million. So every year I felt good about putting 25 million in there. You get 400 jobs, 500 jobs. But anyway, that's a place where I think is the most logical to start reviewing there, which you've done in the study here. I'm like John is saying, we need, and we asked for this, I think, before on the pavement program, because we invested quite a bit in there in the last couple of years, identifying the exact projects that already have money allocated and money banked and where those are, and exactly project by project if we can. So as councilmen, we can get a better feel for what's already kind of in the mill. And then obviously going forward on the CIP budget, cutting it in half is going to be, painful, but we need to be realistic about how we balance the budget here. So yeah, getting very granular if we could, and I know that's in your list of things to do on not only the budgeting forward the CIP projects over the next 5 years, but also giving us a better feel for what do we already have banked, because that all kind of needs to fit together on what's getting done. And then the same, it kind of fits as, and I think we asked this question in the last couple of council meetings. If we finished all of the pavement programs that we have out there and already banked and paid for but not done, that are works in progress, what does that do to our index? Because that was a big initiative of the council, was to get that index up. And it's not up a whole lot, but it will be, I assume, once we finish the backed up projects. So anyway, just getting a better feel for that in the context of CIP, which you have on your list of things to do. I've got one other observation with the property tax and the rate, getting to basically the number that we're getting to this year on property tax is 66.6 million. If you look at our budget, and we're taking that up to 67.5, right? About 900,000. Again, as we study this for the next month and a half before we finalize it, and I know this is a loaded observation and it's not a commitment in any way, but what does it look like to just keep it at 66.6 without, with lowering the tax rate slightly to save that million? If we could do that study.
Okay, we can look at that, certainly.
Yeah.
We'll take a look at that.
Yeah, because I know that we are being, I think the state is requiring us to raise everything 3 to 4%. We haven't seen all that in yet, but just to keep a consistent dollar amount for citizens, at least do the analysis. Let's see how big of a hole we have to cover. And I'm not recommending one way or the other yet, but I'd like to see the figures.
Okay. Councilmember, those are good points. And let me go back to Councilmember Kennard's question as well on the CIP. We have gotten some good information from the streets with regard to the last presentation that I think will be responsive to council's request. I've actually held that off, waiting to see how today went, because I think there's some relationship between the two that we have to kind of go back and rework a little bit of that data and get it back in a format that makes sense. And so we'll certainly work on doing that. I think I've talked with Jim Reed, and as you might expect, Jim said, whatever dollar amount the council would like to fund, I'll find a program that works. So we'll get that data and information together for you. And as you know, there are other departments with needs beyond just streets. We have fire apparatus that needs to be replaced. Parks has some needs as well. So all of those are feeding at the same trough, if you will, with regard to general fund capital. So we'll work through all those items and get back with you. But I do owe you a full street report, and I'll try to get that out in advance for our next meeting so you have a chance to look at that ahead of time.
Yeah, I think we also need to look at, when we come back to the council on that, we need to look at the fund balance because we do have 2 reimbursement resolutions out there, one for the HVAC system at the Convention Center and the other for the suspension bridge that would further lower the available funds for the street program and other council priorities if we were to go with the optional CIP. But I think when we bring that back to you, we need to bring all of that back to you, and we will do that.
That's right. Thank you, Juan. Any other questions that staff can help you with?
I mean, do you have what you need from, we kind of asked for a little more information at this point. Me personally, I'm I understand, particularly this year, and the constraints and the difficulties we face. I don't know that I'm willing to scrap our 5-year plan, but I mean, I understand kind of what the conceit is. But I like a little bit more information before I say that I feel comfortable. I completely understand and see the trade-off between the O&M and the debt service and this infrastructure versus general operations, and just kind of how we're having to balance that, and understand that in this particular economic situation, we're going to have to make sacrifices and make some tough decisions and put some priorities aside. I just like to get a little more detail on what we'd be having to put aside before I feel comfortable giving some more concrete direction as to which way I prefer.
Mayor and Council, I was going to just interject. I think one of the most important things we need to get probably from you today, is there any interest on the council's part to ask the county to calculate an 8% rate increase for next year and bank that? You may have noticed in looking at what other cities have done, some cities have done that, and it's difficult for the public to understand that is a process, a procedural step, if you will. It not necessarily means that the taxes are going up 8% or that council's looking at doing that. But that's a hard thing to explain to the public, and you've probably noticed other cities that have done it or have even entertained it have had a very difficult time explaining the process and what they're up to, and taking quite a bit of heat politically even from just raising the question. So I just want to make sure that you're probably aware of that, and you've probably seen that in news articles around the state and other things. But that probably is the most pressing direction we need to get from you today, because that will require us to bring an agenda item, if not probably the last meeting in June, I would think, to get that done.
Paul, I don't think it's a bad idea just to get that information. I mean, it helps to have the information in front of us when we make a decision. So I think if you're just asking, should we request the county just for the information, I think that's perfectly fine on my end. To me, the more information we have to make a decision, the better off we are. We have more concrete data. And then based on the information that's given to us, then I feel more comfortable making a decision after we have compiled everything together.
So to echo Councilmember Sabito, one of the conversations that we had at the very beginning when we were dealing in the legislative session was, should we go ahead and go ahead and bank it in advance? And I don't know, we didn't. And now that there is a window of opportunity, I want us to be able to consider going ahead and do that. I think it'll be easier now to explain what and why of that increase, especially because we are in the middle of a pandemic. And I mean, people know and understand, and it's everybody's having to readjust their bottom line, and that includes cities. There's some things that will have to happen. So if you need a yes on pursuing information, then you would have a yes from me on pursuing information. The other thing I'd like to enter in as far as how we adjust our budgets and line items and what our priorities are and shifts in priorities. The list of where we are helps, because if we need to, the council priorities are the council priorities, and what we want, yes, we set them out to see them completed. Now, if that means that we can ebb this and flow this in time and in tandem, then that's something that I would rather see up front, so I can know how to make adjustments and what my my wishes are, and what I was hoping to see done, and know in a timeline of where that's coming. Now, whether it happens right now, okay, fine, it's not gonna happen right now, but I need to know, so I can adjust the plans that we were putting in motion. So I think that a succinct list would be helpful for us all, because I mean, I think we all have some things that were priorities, and I mean, now we have the ones that are uniformly a priority of the council, and there's some things that right there that we all want to see done. But I know there's some individual district things that are also that we personally champion for. And so the full view, purview would be more helpful for us, I believe. So thank you for that.
Right. Thank you.
For me on the 8%, I mean, it's just, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And if we're not committing to actually taking those dollars, but I think that we need, it's prudent for us organizationally and in our best interest to at least have the flexibility to have that option down the road should we need it. So yeah, I think I think we can, folks are, smart, and I think we can explain it well that we're not saying we're going to be raising that money. It's just we have if things progress the way, somehow we have the option to in the future if it need be. So I'm in favor of it.
And to that point, I think communicating it well and being strategic in how we communicate this is continuing to be critical, probably more so than in other budget cycles, because I think when we're talking about taxes, people are feeling more economically constrained than they have in the past. And so I think they're going to be sensitive to it as well. So not only communicating the exploration process well, but really also about our budget process and how people can speak into that, as well as what our money goes to. I think that we have a very prudent, I'm always proud of where we're putting our money. I think it's responsible. I think it is towards things that, by and large, infrastructure and core city services. And I think that it's really important for people to understand the budget process and be engaged to be able to speak into that. So that I think that strategic communication is important, because if we don't do that, then what you brought up, Paul, we lose control of the reality of the situation and where we are in this budget process. If that makes sense. So
thank you.
Sounds like you've got consensus to move ahead with getting that information, and then let's talk about how we communicate that in the most appropriate way to let the public know what we're doing and what we're not at this point doing.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great presentation, Paul. Esmeralda, is this the point where you wanted to read a comment into the record?
Yes, if we're about to go into work session 350, it would be.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Mayor and Council, we received a comment from Alan Northcutt related to work session 350. His comment is, I would like to comment on the quarterly investment report in this agenda item. For citizens, it is difficult to determine exactly where the city's investments are positioned, but from the standpoint of our climate crisis, an important step the city can take is to divest from fossil fuels. For example, remove all investments possible from fossil fuels. Why? Because 100% renewable energy contracted with the prolific panels on the fire station roof are just the beginning of climate action. The city has the responsibility to do all it can to address the climate emergency, recognizing that the world has only 10 years to cut emissions by 45% to avoid climate catastrophe. I hope the city recognizes that it is not only the Waco Friends of Peace and Climate calling for action. The very health professionals from the city has relied upon and trusted during the pandemic are echoing our request. Over 350 organizations, including the World Health Organization, representing 40 million health professionals worldwide, have written an open letter to G20 leaders calling for removing hundreds of billions of dollars in subsidies for oil, gas, and coal, the main drivers of both global warming and air pollution. There was an attached file, Mayor and Council, that I forwarded to you earlier. We call on the city of Waco to join the largest divestment movement in history, with some $14 trillion being removed from the fossil fuel sector. Further, it is increasingly recognized that fossil fuel investments are risky, highlighted by the recent announcement of divestment by BlackRock, the world's largest fund manager. Thank you, and that's all I have, Mayor.
All right, thanks, Esmeralda. For this work session, we're joined by Janice Andrews, our Chief Financial Officer, as well as Laura Cox, our Budget Manager. They're going to be going over the second quarter financials. And so, Janice, will you open us up?
Yes, Laura is going to actually discuss financials through March of fiscal year 20, and we'll have some comments on also some budget amendments that are in your packet.
Thank you, Janice. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. It is my pleasure to be here today to present the preliminary second quarter fiscal year 2020 financial statements. Today's presentation will focus primarily on the general fund. One of the most significant portions of the general fund revenue is property taxes, which provides approximately 45% of the budgeted general fund funding sources. The percentage of budget collected through March of FY19 was 97.5%, compared to the 95.27% for FY20 shown on this table. As a result, we are closely monitoring property taxes due to this change. Payments in lieu of taxes, which are also listed on this table and are included in the property taxes line, are essentially transfers from certain enterprise funds that are based on net asset values in those funds. The next largest segment of general fund revenues is sales tax, and as we have highlighted previously, this revenue source is volatile and fluctuates significantly from month to month and can do the same year over year due to adjustments. Through March, the city was ahead of prior year by 7.14%, and you can see this in the fifth column on the table before you. And we were 9.15% ahead of budget, and that's in the sixth column, at this point to date. This strong performance of sales taxes through the first 6 months of the fiscal year have helped sustain the city financially through the COVID pandemic that began to take hold in mid-March. The May collections for March sales came in higher than our initial projections, and we will see what will hopefully be the floor when the city receives the collections for April sales on Wednesday, June 10th. This chart shows how general fund revenues have performed through the second quarter of the last 3 fiscal years. The most significant growth has come from taxes at $7 million from FY18 to FY19 and $3.5 million from FY19 to FY20, which includes both property and sales taxes. This chart shows how the expenditures in the general fund for the first 6 months of the last 3 fiscal years have performed by their nature. After sales and salaries and benefits, which are 61% of the general fund expenditures, the largest increases are in purchase professional technical services and supplies. The increases in purchase professional technical services are primarily due to body-worn camera services, emergency concrete repairs, and hydrologic and hydraulic modeling service. The increases in supplies is due to the purchase of body-worn cameras, a reclassification of radios from capital, and the purchase of the OpenGov software.
I would just like to touch on the amendments that are included in your packet on an operating budget amendment. Most of the amendments that are included in the packet represent agenda items that have gone through as council resolutions. But in the past, as we talked about the COVID impact, staff had some recommended budget amendments to help us cope with the underlying runs in revenue related to COVID. The first one is rolling stock transfer. That is actually returning some money from general fund that had been transferred previously to rolling stock and replacing that with available bond interest to provide that funding back to general fund. You will also find an amendment in the CIP to appropriate that interest for the rolling stock. As we had discussed earlier, there was a transfer to golf course from general fund to allow them to pay back water for some of the outstanding advances and water charges, and we are recommending postponing that due to the COVID revenue shortfalls. We also had talked about, as we were talking about the budget, returning some money from engineering. Engineering is an internal service fund that's supported by general, water, and wastewater. They do have savings in their revenues, and we're projecting returning that to those 3 funds. We also are recommending delaying the planned transfer to equipment replacement. We have about $1.5 million that remains in that fund. So under the current circumstances, we're recommending amending that transfer for this year.
Remind me real quick, on the equipment replacement fund, are we anticipating drawing any of that down this year?
The $1.5 million represents a drawdown coming out of 600,000. We had about 2.1, and then we were taking about 600,000 back this year.
Okay. And then on the rolling stock, so we have bond interest to cover. So we transferred from general fund to rolling stock to help fund some of that, but we have bond interest to cover the rolling stock. So we're just moving that back to general fund.
Yes.
Are there any, in so doing, are there any equipment purchases that we're just foregoing by doing that? Or was that kind of always contemplated when we did it originally?
That was just a dollar-to-dollar replacement. And again, that transfer actually happened in 2018. We have been funding with available bond interest, but we have been spending the bond interest first. And so in looking at that money that was still being held in that fund for rolling stock purchases, we're recommending replacing that with bond interest.
Okay.
So it's not impacting?
It is not
It's
impacting.
not impacting rolling
No,
stock
sir.
purchases.
Okay. Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
The last recommended budget amendment relates to an increase in the sales tax revenue of $1.7 million last year. And as we discussed the budget, we talked about having an offsetting expenditure contingency amount of that 1.7, with the understanding we really would not spend that money unless we had sales tax that was meeting budget. As Laura mentioned, going through March, sales tax was looking really well. So we did utilize some of that money for public safety, and we did budget amendments for those. We are recommending, under the current circumstances, not using any more of that money. So we would be amending the sales tax revenue budget down, as well as the remaining portion of the expenditure contingency offset for the $1,469,000.
Okay, and so to wrap it up, a couple of the other funds I would like to highlight are the utilities funds. And again, we have already spent some time reviewing how we feel we will end the fiscal year. So this comments will be brief, but it does consist of water, wastewater, and WMRs. As a reminder, since weather conditions impact the revenues in these funds, staff closely monitors this funding source and adjusts expenditure spending as needed. And other funds are being closely monitored, again, also to minimize any negative impact on those funds. And I'll state again, we have spent a good amount of time looking at our projections and how we feel we'll end the fiscal year. But the March financial statements show when we're just as the pandemic was starting, and staff has taken those potential impacts into consideration when preparing the year-end projections that were presented during the budget workshop.
I'll just jump in and say thanks for the presentation, Laura and Janice. The numbers are great, and some of the trends are very good year over year and quarter over quarter. And unfortunately, I think our next quarter isn't going to quite look like this. And so I think we're taking an intelligent approach about thinking about, like the last deal we did, about putting that reserve back into sales tax. I think we need to be thoughtful about how we go forward. This is a great report. Again, we shouldn't be shocked when the next one of these is not quite as rosy. But anyway, that's a good report. Thanks.
Thank you.
And I'll just echo that and say that, I mean, it's to staff's credit and this council and prior councils to be in such a good financial position that as we, the year was looking great through March, and we know it's not going to be quite as great going forward for we don't know how long, but that we are going to have to make some tough decisions, but we're in a great position to do so while preserving the core functions of this city and doing the work that the citizens expect of us. And we are, even though it's not pleasant, we're in a much better shape than a lot of other places around the country. And so that's a commendation to staff and the prudent, diligent management of years to keep us in a good place to be able to weather something like this well.
And I'm just gonna piggyback a little bit off of that as well as Councilmember Kennard and Holmes said. Since I've been on council, I look forward to these quarterly reports because they always look so positive and make the financial condition of the city look so well. In fact, I know even though this includes possibly, the last 2 weeks of March, which is really when we started seeing the pandemic hit in our county. In spite of that, look how well our numbers look. And so even as we move into the next quarter, as Councilmember Holmes said, it might not look that good, but I also know that the diligent planning of the council before me, the staff, everyone's work has really just paid off. And even though we have felt the financial impacts of COVID, it hasn't been to the extent that maybe you're seeing in other communities or other cities. And so really kudos to everyone that has paved the way for many years to put us in this financial situation. And so Laura, Janice, thank you so much for the presentation. As always, you do a wonderful job. And thank you so much for just making Q2 look so good and the first half of the fiscal year look so good as well. So thank you.
I'll just add that I think it's the same reason that we're in a good position, which is a diligent and solid staff and a diligent and solid council with us now and before us, is the same reason I think we're going to get through this too. I think that we've got a great budget department, a great finance department who is going to make sure that the goals of this council, the goals of this community are met, while still being financially responsible and serving well in representing our citizens. So I'm thankful to echo what has been said. I'm thankful for what we've done so far, and I'm looking forward to what will be done in the days ahead because I know we got a good team here.
My statements would only be to echo my colleagues. So I appreciate the diligence that your department and departments have given to this. You all know how to squeeze a penny, and we appreciate you for it. The fiscal conservancy of our budgeting team and our finance department have allowed the brunt not to be as strong as it could be, as it has been for other cities, and we appreciate you for it. Now, we have to look at all of them, and I appreciate your good eyes on our bottom line, and that part I expect to allow us to ease through this with. We're gonna feel it, but it may not hurt as bad, and that's because of your expertise and what you do and your passion for this job. So we appreciate it.
I agree with everything that's been said. Janice, Laura, thank you both, and those that have been working with you. We appreciate the good work, and we know we're in good hands as we move into this next stage. So with that, I think we'll wrap that item up. How would everybody feel about taking a 10-minute recess? Okay. Let me ask whether we can do this, Esmeralda and Jennifer, can we just mute and turn off our video and then come back at 3:40 and come back on? Okay, so I've got 3:29 right now. Mute our sound and turn off video, and then we'll reconvene here in 10 minutes, at 3:40 p.m. Thank you. Good afternoon. We will now reconvene our work session at 3:41 p.m. and I will turn it back over to our city manager, Wiley Sim, to introduce the next session.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, our next work session discussion is on the Stormwater Master Plan, Capital Improvements Plan, and Grant Opportunity Update. We have Amy Bravarley Highland, our Public Works Engineering Division Manager, and Jed Walker with Walker Partners Engineering. So, Amy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Wiley. As you all may recall, the Stormwater Master Plan is just another component of the overall planning process that Council charged the city to do to ensure that we know what we need to do to protect the city in the future. So today, Jed Walker is going to give us an update on where we're at with the master plan, and we're pretty close to being done and wrapping it up. So Jed, I'll let you take over.
Thank you, Amy, and Mayor, Council, and City Manager. I think to start out, I would really like to thank three people who have contributed significantly to the Stormwater Master Plan. One is Amy Berlarley Highland and Steve Martin of the City of Waco, and then Curtis Bottle, our sub-consultant, who is a civil engineer and hydrologist with HDR. So with that, and Esmeralda, if you can move to the next slide, please. I think the pending question is, why a master plan? And on the next slide, there's a quote that I really like, that we must plan for the future so it won't overwhelm us. I wish I knew who said that. I think it was either Isaac Asimov or Ray Bradbury, but I couldn't find that. But nonetheless, I think it's a great quote. Esmeralda, are you able? Okay. The slide wasn't coming up on my end, but it is now. Okay, so planning for the future, in order to have a strategic plan, we need good information. And this map, whoops. Okay, and the map that's before us now, this is the floodplain map of Waco Creek. The big highway going right down the middle of your slide is I-35. In the top right-hand corner is the Brazos River. To the right of I-35 is Baylor, and to the left is downtown Waco. And this floodplain map is the current floodplain map that all developers and builders and planners will use in Waco. And this was developed in 1970 by the Federal Emergency Management Agency. And even though these maps have been updated since 1970, as late as December of 2019, it still is only a digital mapping update, so it can be compatible with GIS systems. The hydrology, hydraulics, the computer modeling technology, and the level of urbanization for these maps is all from 1970. Next slide, please. So using the latest technology and the current land use conditions, which equates to the impervious cover, the Stormwater Master Plan will provide new, updated floodplain maps so that the city planners, developers, builders, and engineers can plan projects using reliable and accurate information. The little video that you're about to watch, if you could, Esmeralda, please start it. This video is of the same area of Waco Creek. There's I-35 in the middle, downtown on the left, Baylor on the right. This is the exact same floodplain that you saw moments ago, but this is with new technology, new statistical data, and new information. And you can see on your screen that there's quite a bit of difference. Next slide, please, Esmeralda, and go to slide 7 if you don't mind. To the next one, please, slide 7. This is a comparison of the two. The floodplain in purple is the one that we've developed with the Stormwater Master Plan. The one there in blue, the thin band that goes right down along the banks of Waco Creek, that was the 1970 floodplain prepared by FEMA. And so I think the question is, will these new floodplains like this hinder development in Waco? And we think the answer is no. We think instead that the new floodplains like this will allow better planning, responsible planning to develop safe and sustainable new developments throughout all of Waco. Next slide, please, Esmeralda. So the goals of this master plan are, 1, to mitigate the existing dangers of flooding. And to define flooding, the Federal Emergency Management Agency states that flooding is a temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of floodwaters of 2 or more acres of land or 2 or more homes from the overflow of a watercourse or rapid accumulation of stormwater runoff. The reason this is important is that our master plan studies the major, most flood-prone watercourses in Waco. We did not go in and study all the localized flooding that may be just along a roadway or in a selected neighborhood or just over the course of a very small area. What we studied were the major watercourses. Goal number 2 is to protect the lives and property of citizens living and working in the city. And number 3 is to prevent future flood losses from occurring through sound regional planning. Next slide, please, Esmeralda. So how do we do this? Well, next slide, please, Esmeralda. We started off by gathering and recording historical flooding information along the major watercourses within the city. Then to analyze and update hydrology and hydraulics for these major watercourses, including the Brazos River. To establish accurate mapping limits of the 100-year floodplains, and then secure approval from FEMA for the updated 100-year floodplain revisions so that these new floodplains can become the published floodplains of record. Next is to create regional floodplain regulations and drainage design criteria, because unfortunately, flooding does not know jurisdictional boundaries. So we've included the cities of Robinson, Woodway, Hewitt, and McLennan County in a lot of the planning and scoping of the design criteria and floodplain regulations. And at least verbally, all of these entities have agreed to adopt Waco's criteria once Waco has had a chance to see it and adopt it. Next is to recommend a capital improvement program to plan and construct new flood mitigation projects to protect the public, analyze funding options to implement the CIP, and then last, to develop a draft stormwater utility fee for your consideration. Next slide, please. The planning area, if you can see this on the map, are the major water courses within Waco, and these include Flat Creek, Waco Creek, Marlins Branch, Primrose Creek, Harris Creek, Cottonwood Creek, Barron's Branch, and Delano Avenue Ditch area. Next slide, please. Historically, the flooding hotspots are shown as the red dots on the map. The pink or salmon colored is the city limits of Waco. The dark red dots have had actual flood loss claims. The open red dots are dots that have had flooding. You can see where a lot of them lie along the creeks. Some do not lie along the water courses, and those would be localized flooding areas. Next slide, please. Well, with regards to creating regional floodplain regulations, one of the best ways to plan and implement best stormwater management practices is through sound modern drainage criteria, which can guide and direct the new drainage infrastructure installed with the new infrastructure, with the new development. Waco's current storm drainage design manual was published in 1959, and it served Waco very well, but it is time for a change and for an update. Unfortunately, too many new subdivisions and developments are creating flood conditions that need to be remedied now, and the city will have to remedy these, and this is not sustainable with new development. So we're going to be recommending new design criteria, new floodplain regulations, as well as a new drainage policy. Next slide. Probably the biggest and strongest move that we've made in partnership with the city is to update the FEMA floodplain maps so that developers and engineers will have good information to work from. Similar to the map that I showed you at the beginning of the slide presentation, this is an updated 100-year floodplain boundary of Waco Creek. I thought this would be a good example to look at. You can see Franklin Avenue, Waco Drive, and New Road, and Academy right there in the center. Well, the 1970 FEMA floodplain, or the current floodplain of record that developers and planners are using, goes right through Academy. And you can see that a lot of the floodplain in light blue is actually wider than the one that we've calculated and submitted to FEMA for review. And the purple one, or the new one, some places narrower, some places wider. But regardless of whether the new floodplain is wider or narrower, it's based on more accurate information. One of the things that we did was we actually field surveyed the creek bank throughout, like in this case, throughout Waco Creek, so that the information we used on the input side of the computer modeling software was extremely precise. What was done in 1970 was all based on aerial maps, not field surveys. Next slide, please, Esmeralda. This is one of the most significant changes that we found in Waco, so I thought it'd be good for you all to be able to see it. There's Oakwood Cemetery right in the center. This is Primrose Creek. On the far right-hand side of the screen is the floodplain of the Brazos River. and LaSalle Avenue. I don't know if you can see that well or not, but it's running diagonally from lower left to kind of the middle of the screen. The light blue band, again, is the 1970 floodplain, and that's the one that's published, and that's the one being used today. The purple is what we have calculated as the new floodplain to be considered by FEMA for approval and acceptance. Another question that I think everybody will have is exactly what does this mean to a homeowner? Because you can see there are some homes that will be in the pink or the purple area that will be in the floodplain after this floodplain gets approved that aren't in it today. And unfortunately, if these homeowners go to refinance or sell their homes, there's a good chance that flood insurance will be required. On the other hand, from a planning standpoint, all new development, all new redevelopment in the area, the developers and builders of the new facilities will be able to have good information to plan from so that new buildings and new structures and new homes don't end up being flood prone. Next slide, please. Okay. Whoa. So the next thing that we were tasked to do was to develop a capital improvement program which would mitigate the flood prone areas that have been identified within the Stormwater Master Plan. Next, please, Esmeralda. Two basic strategies have been used for flood mitigation, one being a structural option, and structural improvements would be conveyance improvements such as channels or new bridges or new culverts, or regional detention facilities which would store the water and release it at a lower flow rate so that the peak flows and flooding conditions downstream would be reduced. Non-structural mitigation options include what we had just discussed with new drainage criteria implementation, but also one of property acquisition or buyouts. And I know that's somewhat of a sensitive topic, but we will show in the Stormwater Master Plan that some projects, if implemented, would cost much more than the actual property values that we'd be trying to protect. So we'll provide the City of Waco with the alternatives between doing flood mitigation versus buying out properties. Here's what I thought was a real good example of a capital improvement project, and this is just one of 17 that have been identified. This one is at Floyd Casey Stadium, the old Floyd Casey Stadium site. And the purple area here is the current existing floodplain. If stream restoration improvements are done, which is the part in yellow that you can see outlined, plus if new culverts are added underneath the roadway there, those culverts are shown in blue, then the floodplain can be reduced down to the orange squiggly line. And you can see that there's a number of houses up there that are along Waco Creek that would be removed from the floodplain. So this is an example of what we did for each of the flood mitigation projects that we've identified for the master plan. Next, please, Esmeralda. To accompany each of these projects, this is the worksheet which describes each project, and you'll also notice a cost estimate there on the left. So every project identified will have a schematic engineering plan as well as a cost estimate. Next, please. Okay, so we've worked closely with city staff to go in and rank the projects. Just having flood mitigation projects is one thing, but we had to somehow come up with a way to objectively quantify and prioritize the projects. You'll notice the top three criterion are flood damage reduction, and these include reduction to flooding of habitable structures, public safety and mobility, channel stability. And then in project implementation, we have engineering economy, funding sources, right-of-way or easement acquisition, and ease of permitting. And then in the green are environmental considerations, which include enhancement of water quality, floodplain reclamation, neighborhood impacts, and potential for recreation and open space for linear parks. So what we've tried to do is come up with a way to objectively compare each of the projects that we've identified. Next, please. So these are the 17 projects that we have gone through and ranked, us with city staff. So we go to 1 to 17, and you can see the scores out of a possible score of 107. The highest one was a regional detention facility up along Chapel Road, and that had a score of 85. I think it's also interesting to note that this is for a 30-year planning window. So when you see the total of what this is, none of us should panic. It is over a very long period, and we're still working with city staff to come up with the capital improvement program for the next 5 years. That has not been determined yet. So next, please, Esmeralda. But the total for 30 years that's been identified is $132 million. But I think it's also important to note that of that cost, 2 projects comprise more than 50% of it. Next, please, Esmeralda. This is the same copy of the watersheds, the same map as you saw on the watersheds, and the projects are up in purple on the left, and you can see how they're dispersed throughout each watershed. The red circles with the number are the project locations along with the ranking of each of the projects. And all this is for is so that council can have some idea of the dispersion of the projects throughout the city. Okay, one of the last things that we've been asked to look at is to analyze funding options. I believe most of us realize that the stormwater projects are not a significant part of the most recent bond issuances. And also we've heard the last hour and a half or 2 hours regarding the economic impacts of COVID-19, where resources are stretched and it's just a very difficult time. But we do want to talk about some possible funding sources. One is a brand new program by the Texas Water Development Board called the Flood Infrastructure Fund. And this is specifically for cities targeted for new drainage infrastructure projects. Waco is in a very, very good position to apply for one or more of these, primarily due to the fact that you have just completed a lot of hard data with the Stormwater Master Plan that will be excellent information for an application process. There's what's called an abridged application, and it's either for a grant or a 0% loan. And those abridged applications are actually due in this month in June. And if the water board approves of the abridged application, they'll invite you to come back for a formal application this fall or winter. Other possible funding sources are a stormwater utility fee, and then developer participation and TIF funding. Next, please. All right, the next steps with target dates off to the right is to submit the abridged grant applications for the selected projects to the Water Development Board. And we're working with staff now on selecting those projects. The next task is to get the letters of map revision. That's the formal approval term from FEMA for the new floodplain areas that have been studied. The next item is to complete the drainage criteria, drainage policy, and update the floodplain ordinance to be presented to council for consideration. The next is to complete a draft stormwater utility fee for council's consideration. After that, hopefully this fall or winter, the Texas Water Development Board will ask for full grant applications for the shortlisted projects. Next will be to complete the Brazos River floodplain analysis and submit and secure a letter of map revision from FEMA for that. We expect that to be sometime early 2021 and hope to be completed by February of 2021. And then the last is not the last task, it's to be going on, but we plan to conduct public meetings, and the public meetings will most likely be in the form of a video conference before the new drainage criteria, revised floodplain maps, and the new floodplain ordinance. And so with that, that is our update for the Stormwater Master Plan.
What questions does council have? Comments?
I only got a couple. Thanks, Jed. I mean, I think this is really important, really useful, and really timely, particularly given the Water Development Board's new funding source that I'm thankful that we're getting this done in time to go out and go after that. So I mean, really, I guess it's just getting, when we figure out, just informing us of the kind of the projects that y'all think we have a chance of getting and what we actually submit to them, and kind of where those impacted areas are. And then my only real question is, so once FEMA accepts this new plan, do they inform impacted property owners that they are now in a nationally designated floodplain? And how does that process work? Because that is an impact, and we need to communicate that somehow.
Yeah, no, it's our responsibility to communicate that. As part of the acceptance from FEMA, we have to certify that we've informed everyone who's been affected. We'll either be in or out of a floodplain.
Okay.
From a price, go ahead, John. Sorry.
No, I said that's about all I have. I mean, again, I appreciate this, and these are important projects that can help sustain the long-term development and viability of our community. And so I'm glad. Thank you for doing all this work, and I'm glad we're being very proactive in going for some funding like immediately. I think that's a great thing.
Jed, one of the things you showed was you highlighted a spot where it was in the floodplain, but it'll be taken out of the floodplain. How many? Maybe it's hard to ask this question without me having the proposed floodplain in front of us, but are there more winners than losers in this? Is it there going to be more people that find themselves in the floodplain than they were before? What can we anticipate from that?
Well, it is an overall increase in floodplain inundation. But I would say that most of it is going to be down in the Primrose Creek area that I showed you as the worst spot. The second worst spot is Waco Creek that I showed downtown and in Baylor. And then there's some pretty large undeveloped areas actually along Cottonwood Creek that encompass a whole lot of the additional floodplain. But if you want to break it up in winners and losers, unfortunately, there are going to be more that are going to be in the floodplain rather than removed from it.
And those that are put into it, if it's a homeowner that's put it, will they be forced to get flood insurance by their third-party lenders? I mean, that might be beyond the scope. I'm just trying to recognize the scope of what is going to happen.
Typically, what happens on that with a third-party lender, if you were to go into refinance, then most likely that would come up during the refinance process. Or if you went to sell, the buyers of that particular home that would be in the floodplain that wasn't before, it would come up, during the purchasing process. Whether or not homeowners just, get informed that, hey, you need to go get flood insurance, that would be on a case-by-case basis. My answer would be probably not, but it's not totally out of the possibility.
I think that's one of the consequences of, ideally, if you're in the floodplain, you're actually at risk. Then if you have the means to get flood insurance, that'd be ideal. But one of the potential consequences of this is there's going to be, or that was my question, was will there be people that are required to get flood insurance? Because in my experience, if you take out a note on a piece of property, the financial institution requires you to carry that flood insurance. And so I'm trying to play out what all the impact of this is going to be. Obviously, we don't want structures to flood, especially uninsured structures. But one of the other consequences could be that there's individuals who are paying a monthly premium that they weren't previously paying because of flood insurance being required by their mortgage. And so just something to think about, I guess.
Right. No, it is. It's a big thing to think about. And it's unfortunate. But the other thing is, we don't want to end up 50 years from today with having a lot of other structures, new structures built from this.
Sure. 100%. Yep.
Hey, Dylan, just to add on a little bit to what you were saying, because you asked a question that I was going to about the insurance, but also as more homes or more areas are moved into flood locations, and I'm just thinking out loud, will that deter some people to move more into the core of the city, which is one of our goals as well, with flood insurance being as a mandate now with people that are going to buy new homes, especially around the Primrose Creek or especially around Floyd Casey area. I'm thinking of areas like that. A lot of the areas that are going to be encompassed now in the flood zone are in the core of the city. And I'm wondering if that'll have an impact of people that possibly don't want to live in a flood zone or flood area. Maybe that'll deter them from moving to the core of the city. So these are just things that I'm thinking about, the long-term effects that this could possibly have for people that are going to be buying homes in these areas.
So I appreciate my colleagues for bringing up the potential cost incurrences of people who, may or may not having to have flood insurance. The time I spent in Houston, it's one of those things that you don't really know you need it until you need it. So even moving back here, I was like, I need flood insurance. She was like, you're not a flood. I really don't care. Just put it on there. But one of the things that I was looking at on the map, and these are not people who can actively do anything about it, but I was noticing that the Oakwood area is in that new plane. And I want to know, if there is that what you were in the considerations of how to fix it, the alternatives to protect those areas of sacred spaces like the cemeteries and that kind of thing, because that's one of the historic cemeteries in our city. And I would hate for the unimaginable to happen and that area not be protected.
Right. And I think that you'll be glad to know that one of the major capital improvement projects is to resolve that flooding area along Primrose Creek. That's the good news. The bad news is that is the second most expensive or the second greatest cost capital improvement project, and it's about $30 million. But there is a plan that can be done to alleviate that.
I thought I saw that and I was like, okay. But that, I know that that's something to keep on the forefront as well. I mean, of course we deal with the people who are, our constituency that are living, but, we also have to make sure that we don't desecrate the memory and memorial of those who are not.
Right. And also, this is pretty timely. We're meeting Monday with the Oakwood Cemetery Association to go over this new floodplain with them and with how that may or may not impact future development of Oakwood Cemetery. And I think the good part of that is that they are absolutely on board and want to plan for it in the future to work with the new floodplain, not the old.
Thank you.
Hey, Jed, this is Holmes. Thanks for the great presentation. My questions are more to the process. We haven't done one of these since the 70s. Is that right? I guess what's prompting us to do it now? I'm just trying to get familiar with that. Why are we doing it now, and how do other cities do it?
Well, that's a great question. The floodplains that we are using as a community right now were prepared in 1975. The engineering information for those maps was prepared in 1970. And so what any city can do is they can update those maps annually, biannually, every 5 years, whatever the case may be. And to some degree, Waco has been able to do that through the years, but for the most part, most of the maps have not been updated. And so what that means to us as a city and to us as a community is that when new development is coming in or when redevelopment is occurring, especially like in the downtown area, then the floodplain of record being used is that 1970 floodplain. And what we all are afraid of, us and city staff, is that we know that that's not the best available information, and we know that that's not the most accurate information, but it's all that city staff can rely on to help guide and plan new development. And so hopefully this new update will be able to move forward with good information, but that needs to be backed up and coupled with updated drainage criteria and an updated floodplain ordinance so that there is modern ordinance and criteria that can help city staff in moving forward with all the new development and redevelopment.
So the upshot is that and some of this it's true, right? I mean, it's like, this is the best technology we have. This is showing where the new floodplains are. I feel a little bit like Jack Nicholson. I can't handle the truth on this, but I'm wondering, we can't ignore it, obviously, but does this then go into like a federal bank of, here's the latest information on City of Waco, where bank isn't the right word, but federal record of some kind, where as lenders, as Dylan pointed out, as lenders look, hey, I got it, before I do this loan, I got to get this insurance. It's a higher standard now. But is that, do we register our new map in with some nationally recognized
Yes.
records?
Yes, once it's approved by FEMA, then it becomes part of the new flood insurance rate maps. You may have heard the term FIRM. That's what FIRM stands for, Flood Insurance Rate Map. It would become part of that, and it would be in a national database where any and all lenders could look at it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jed.
You bet.
Well, I mean, one last question. How long will it take, or what's the process before it's finally filed with that federal database?
Well, we think we're within weeks or maybe months of getting all of these water courses approved by FEMA, and that's a pretty big deal. That's been going on for some time now. But for the Brazos River, we're not expecting to get that new floodplain approved until about February of 2021.
Okay.
That particular one has not been submitted yet.
Okay. Thanks, Jed.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Jed, thanks for your great work on this. I mean, this is really important, and I recognizing that some people are going to end up needing to get flood insurance. The reality is we're looking at better information now, and they do need flood insurance. And so, having those premiums is, that's, nobody wants that surprise, but we got to deal with this. It's the right thing for us to be doing, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, are you ready to take us to our next?
Sure. Mayor and Council, our next discussion item is an update on the Advanced Metering Infrastructure System project. We have Lisa Tyre, our Director of Water Utilities, here to give us that update. So, Lisa.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. Yes, I'm here to give an update on the AMI projects. So you can go to the next slide. So why AMI? I'm going to cover why AMI, funding sources, customer service benefits, leak detection, staffing implications, and customer engagement, and the current progress. You can go to the next one. So why AMI? AMI achieves the following goals. It reduces errors, it reduces under-recorded consumption, it improves data collection, and it gives customers easy access to their consumption history. And so for funding, we were able to do this project by utilizing the Texas Water Development Board's State Water Implementation Fund for Texas, which is called SWIFT. To qualify, we had to go and get the state water plan amended to include this project. And this project qualified for this funding because it's considered a water conservation project. This low interest loan program, SWIFT, saved the city about $1 million in interest. And we're very appreciative to the Texas Water Development Board for having selected this project. So customer service benefits, and there's a lot. So with this AMI and with the customer service portal that comes with AMI, it allows customers to view their consumption history. It enhances communication with the customers, and it allows us to give customers early notifications to either leaks or if they have excessive water use, or even if we need to close their street for some reason, or even if we have a boiled water notice. So we're able to push those messages out to them. This is a screenshot of one of the screens on the online customer portal. And in this screenshot, you can see the customer can see their daily usage, compare it to their past usage. They can see if they're meeting their water budget that they set for themselves and their household. It also offers other items that they might be interested in. You know, they can check for a leak, learn where they use their most water, and it shows them a history of their past notifications. This is another shot of some screens that are available. And in this screenshot, the customer is able to see how they compare with similar users, receive an estimate on how they are using their water, and get an idea of how they can save water. All these measures can help a customer manage their water bill. In this screenshot, it shows a picture of a potential leak on a customer. It also directs the customer to ways to check for that leak and asks for the customer to indicate whether or not a leak was located. And that information helps us fine-tune the system as we go forward. This information will be available to our customers using their computer or their phone, and it's Apple and Android compatible. So not only can our customers use this system to detect leaks, but so can the water distribution system. With this system, they will be able to check for leaks that are, or will be able to hear for leaks that are in pipes that are 16 inches or smaller. And an acoustic sensor will be placed on about every fourth service, and it gives us real-time data, allowing us to have a quick response to leaks. And so the way this works is that we listen at the quietest time, we determine if there's a change in the frequency, so there's a different sound if there's a water leak, and it produces a report of probable leaks for investigation. This allows for a quicker leak response, which then can have less impact on our customers, less damage to the streets, and it allows us to be proactive versus being reactive. And this is a cutaway of what the device looks like in the meter box. So the white box in the center of the picture is the meter interface unit that's obtaining the meter information, the meter reading from the meter. On the far right, attached to the copper pipe, is the leak detector. And near the top, that white box at the top, that is the endpoint that transmits the information from both the leak detection and the meter interface unit to a thing called the CGR, which is located on a water tower, a communication tower, or some other structure. From there, all the information is transmitted into the cloud and is available for staff and for the customer. So there are some staffing implications with AMI. Currently, we have 16 positions in meter services. And we will, we believe at the end of this project, we will be able to move several staff members into our distribution and collections to help us focus more on a preventative maintenance there. And as a part of this project, we've been heavily involved in, you can change it, heavily involved in customer engagement, communication, and education. So when we started the field work, we did a press release. We had 6 community meetings. We put a message on the outside of the bill envelope. We had a bill insert. We put information on our website. We put it out on Facebook. And every time they retrofit a meter or they change a meter, they're placing a door hanger for the customer. And the next slide just shows the bill insert that was used at that time. So as we go forward and as we get closer to the end of this project and we get ready for our customers to really take advantage of this product, we will be doing more customer communication. Again, more information out on our website as well as using social media. And then we'll have a full-fledged sign-up campaign where we'll hopefully be able to have some places where customers can come to us and we can help them sign up and show them how to use their customer portal. And this next screen is just from our vendor, what some of the notices that they've seen used before to help with the sign-up campaign. And so this last slide kind of shows the project timeline. We had hoped this project would move a little faster than what it did. We had a kickoff in February, and we did a whole lot of site surveys and project planning and equipment getting delivered, and we did our press release and updated our website, and we began training staff on how to install these. And then I don't want to say it puttered, but we had a few issues. And then May to December of this year, we have been working again with community meetings, and then with the installation of AMI. And we kind of we think the installation of the AMI will continue until September. At this point in time, we have 75% of our meters have either been retrofitted or changed out. We have 10 out of 20 routes are being read by drive-by reading, which is kind of the intermediate step. And we're hoping to have this whole project wrapped up in October, with us still continuing our customer portal campaign. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer any of those.
I have two. One is a technical question. I saw all those wires in the box. How is it powered? And because I see wires in a box about water, and if there's a leak, I see that maybe being a problem. So how does all that kind of work?
It's a waterproof battery within there.
Okay. And how long do those last?
Well, that's always a debatable thing, but they tell us 20 years.
Okay. So that'll be part of the long-term.
Yeah, and one of the reasons for the battery life, it depends on how many times a day we want to go out and get that information.
Okay.
So if we're doing it once a day, they're saying 20 years, but if we went out and did it 5 times a day, it would lessen that lifespan.
Okay, that makes sense. And then my only other question is, back in, I'm looking forward to the campaign for the customer portal. Back in April, we had a presentation of a program that is sponsored by the National League of Cities, that service line warranty, to help provide low-cost insurance for water and sewer line breaks, because so often our homeowners don't understand that, at the meters where their responsibility starts, and even if it's the line under the ground to the house, that could be a significant cost, but that they're responsible for that. And so, I think now that we're going to be pushing out, same day notification about potential leaks, I think kind of tagging along that service line program with that would be a great complement to our campaign and this rollout of this whole advanced metering system. So I'd encourage staff to take another look at that and maybe get another report back to us, because 40 cities in Texas and 700 nationwide already have this program. So it's National League of Cities endorsed, and it's no obligation to the homeowner. And I think that this particular AMI project presents the perfect opportunity when our homeowners are thinking about this to have this service kind of come along as a tag along.
Yes, sir. We can include that.
Thank you.
Hey, Lisa, this is Hector. Thank you so much for the presentation. I do have a few quick follow-up questions for you. The screen where you show that the customers are able to get the information from an iPad or laptop, et cetera, things like that. I'm assuming, or maybe I shouldn't assume, but is that information also provided in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking customers?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. A lot of what we've been working on right now has been for things to be bilingual, but I will get you that answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Also, how do you see this working with, or do you even see it working with, the new initiative that we launched with Water Connect?
Well, so with Water Connect, one of the things that we have going on with this is that the customer will be able to pay their bills using their cell phone or a computer, which they can do now, but they'll be able to go into the portal and actually pay through that. And that is with that same company. And we are working with that company to have a single sign-on so that people don't have to go into one system, sign on, and then doing a whole nother password for another system to get into. So it should be seamless for the customer. I see it as being very integrated.
That's exactly what I was hoping you would say. I think if we can integrate both systems, I think that just makes our product, the services that we're offering to our community, that much more stronger, that much more user friendly. And I see more people taking advantage of it if that's the case, and so thank you for saying that. In your presentation, you also mentioned some rearrangement of staffing, but you do not foresee any staffing losses. Am I correct in saying that?
You are correct. We are always trying to up our preventative maintenance because we have found that it makes a difference in what our CIP is if we're on top of that preventative maintenance. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make every one of our assets last as long as possible. And having that extra staffing just gets us out there to be able to do some of that additional
Wonderful.
work.
Wonderful. And then the last thing I was just going to say is, as we get the information out to our community, as we do the social media campaigns, as we are doing bill inserts, Facebook, door hangers, etc. Just, we'll always say this communication is key. And so once again, if we can make it bilingual, I would definitely recommend that it's done bilingual. That way it is understood by not only our Spanish, our English-speaking constituency, but our Spanish-speaking constituency. That's a tongue twister as well, please. And so as you guys move forward with that, I would greatly appreciate that. But thank you so much for the information and congratulations on a wonderful project.
Hey, Lisa. So the community meetings that were already held in the initial communication push, was it our typical public meetings, or was it specified to neighborhood associations? How was that?
We reached out to every neighborhood association that we could, and then we tried to put them in very central locations. Mm-hmm. And some of them were fairly well attended, and some of them mm-hmm. were not so well attended. Mm-hmm. But we did try to put that information out. One of the things we're hoping to do with one of the staff members is reposition them so that they are a field customer service person, so that so that they can actually take appointments and go out and help someone get set up on the portal if they're not able to come to us. So that is one of the ideas too here, is to have a way for us to go out and reach community members who maybe need more assistance.
Okay. If it's something that, I'm gonna say we, but I really mean, but council, if in this virtual realm of it all, if it's something that a virtual town hall will assist with, because someone can come and show how to go through the process, exactly what it does, and that's something that then can be utilized for your benefit repeatedly without you having to man it and staff it, perhaps that's a way to do it as well. Just because I think this is a wonderful product. I think it, just the ability to detect and identify leaks alone is something that I know I'm looking forward to being helpful. I was like, watch your toilet. What? Come on. Who didn't lift the handle back up? And I think that's helpful for our people, but I want to make sure as many people as possible get that information, and as Councilmember Sabito said, in English and Spanish, because I think that this is a great product and you all have done a great job. And I want to make sure that as many people know, because I know, who's not guilty of not completely reading their entire water bill? So I want to make sure that there are multiple ways to get the information out. So if there's anything, that we can do from our end, i.e. virtual town halls, that kind of business, I'm willing to do so.
Well, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate the presentation and glad to see this project getting near the end.
Thank you, Lisa. Mayor and Council, our next presentation is a discussion of Waco Regional Airport, including performance, activities, projects, and grants. Joel Martinez, our Director of Aviation. Joel.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I guess we'll talk about some of the upcoming projects. We have several resolutions in the past maybe 2 or 3 city council meetings, and then going forward today, as well as in the next 2 weeks. So we'll talk about our current, just to kind of brief you all on our current level of air service based on the national travel implications with COVID-19, what that looks like. We'll talk about historical review of grant projects and what we've done to fund projects and how we've invested in the airport, as well as federal investment in our airport in the last 10 years. We'll talk about how projects are developed, going through that process, discussing the master plan, the timeline there, talk about project funding and implementation of the FAA for federal funding and moving through the airport improvement projects and the CARES Act funding that we'll see go before council here also. Our current level of air service usage has decreased significantly, as seen nationally across the country. When COVID-19 hit on March 24th, when stay-at-home orders were being placed, we saw a significant decrease in travelers as well as cancellations. The airline has responded by reducing overall service. In March, we had 6 flights a day. At this current time, we have 2 flights, and starting Thursday and for the month of June, we'll have 1 flight a day. That is to help them offset some of their cost and some of those things. As ridership starts to increase, they're going to bring back those flights. As of right now, July's flight schedule looks to be back at 5 flights a day, but that is subject to review and to change as well. Reliability was an issue or something that we track at the airport. Again, March having a full slate or 6 days or 6 flights a day schedule. We saw a significant number of cancellations. April, also we saw a growing number of cancellations until they could adjust their published schedule. Again, with May having 2 daily flights, our reliability has increased obviously, but our ridership has decreased. Moving on to our grants or grant usage at the airport. Over the past 10 years, the airport or the city and the FAA have contributed significantly to the investment of the infrastructure of the airport, ranging in projects from runway 119-1432 rehabilitation to land acquisition and ARF trucks. This is not an all-encompassing list. This is kind of highlights just a few that we've done here in the last 10 years. Again, the total investment is a little over $39 million with a local contribution of 2.8 or roughly 2.8 million with a federal investment of 36 million. There is a difference in the percentage. Most of the grants that you see come before City Council approval require a 10% match. This obviously is not a 10% contribution. Some of the grant funding was from the AURA, or Airport Reinvestment Act, that was from 2008, 2009. So those were 100% funded, much like the CARES Act that we're going to see today also. Project planning. So the airport master plan was completed and approved in 2018. It was an extensive study that created a list of projects for the airport to undertake in coordination with the FAA, but it did not create a funding source for those or identify all the funding for those projects. So from that airport master plan, we create a capital improvement plan, which is a 5-year spending plan or implementation plan with the FAA. They take those plans and projects and the priorities of the region or the Southwest region of the United States, and they help us determine which projects then meet the priority or that criteria, and they fund those projects accordingly. Both the airport master plan and the capital improvement plan they are living documents. So we review those with federal mandates. We also identify additional funding if needed for certain scenarios or criteria. So these are a continual or annual review that we go through with the FAA. The airport master plan developed a wide range of projects, like you had heard earlier with a stormwater plan. It was a 30-year timeline. The airport master plan was a 20-year timeline. What I've listed here are some short-term projects that we identified that we can approach and get these completed within the next, I guess at the time, it was 6 or 7 years with the anticipated federal funding that we had indicated from the FAA. And you can see some of those projects we've already undertaken. We've completed the ARF vehicle. You will see some land acquisition that's down there as project number 7 that we've purchased also ahead of schedule. But we do also have some projects that are down there that do not have federal participation. And so we'll talk about some of that and how we can apply for some of those projects as well. The airport master plan continues to develop or strategically place intermediate projects that are 5 to 10 years out. You'll see there Taxiway Charlie is one of the projects that we're going to award later today because the FAA has identified the need and the priority for Taxiway Charlie. But we've also identified the funding for that as well. through that. And you'll also see acquire 44.4 acres to protect runway 19 runway protection zone. We've also purchased or procured a little over 6 acres with that as well. So again, this is not an all-inclusive, one-size-fits-all project list. This helps us identify projects, and as funding and priorities come available or change, it allows us to fund those projects through different funding mechanisms. And how are these projects funded? Typically, the airport has the Airport Improvement Program, which is a series of entitlement funding from the FAA due to the nature or the size of our airport and the number of passengers that fly in and out of our airport. We're entitled to $1 million a year, which requires a 10% match typically on a typical year. This particular year, we have the CARES Act funding, which provided additional funding to offset or to stimulate the economy and to create opportunities for airports to fund projects, not only fund projects, but fund operations of the airport for a period or a performance period of 4 years. So you'll see in the following slides how we talk about covering operating expenses for 4 years and then putting some projects up on that list as well. And then TxDOT also provides a routine airport maintenance project or grant available that we utilize for smaller projects. That grant is capped out at $100,000 a year. So the Airport Operating and Maintenance CARES Act implementation plan that we have, and we've worked this list out with the FAA to ensure that it fits the FAA's policy on how we can spend these funds. This policy is different than our normal airport improvement program. The policy that they're deferring to is the airport revenue policy, so it allows us to cover projects that would normally not be covered under the airport improvement plan or program policies. The airport has planned to cover our operating costs, which ranges from salaries to utilities, electricity bills, all those things for the next 4 years, and we can reimburse the city or
Are you watching on the internet or are you watching on the channel?
The channel, here we go. All right, welcome back, everyone. We apologize for the technical problem there. We'll ask Joel to begin his presentation a couple of slides back.
Okay, so regressing back a couple of slides, talking about airport grant funding. There are 3 sources of funding for the airport that we typically use, there are 2 sources. There is the Airport Improvement Program, which is our typical or normal entitlement funding, and that's based on the size of our airport. It's also based on the number of enplanements that we see. And our entitlement at this point is set at $1 million a year, and that allows us to do a majority of our capital improvement projects. In this scenario that we're in right now, the FAA has also been given the CARES Act, and that is an opportunity for airports to create or sustain the local economy as well as create projects and jobs on the airport through construction projects. And then we typically have the TxDOT provides the routine airport maintenance program, which is used for smaller projects, maintenance projects, crack sealing, rubber removal, airfield markings, and that's capped at $1,000 a year. So the plan that we worked out with the FAA has been to break our CARES Act entitlement up into 2 components. One is airport operating and maintenance, and we've covered a list of our operating expenses ranging from salaries all the way to utility bills to office supplies and things of that nature for the next 4 years. We can go back to January 20th of this year, and we can move that performance period until fiscal year ending 2023. This also allows us to recover what is normally funded through the general fund, ARF, and our firefighting and law enforcement support for the airport. So we've also included that in part of our operating expenses. And so that'll also relieve some burden to the general fund. You'll also see that we have some eligible grant matches there. The 10% amendment that we're seeing on the agenda today is eligible for reimbursement, so we're going to reimburse the airport or the city through that project. And then we also have maintenance projects. These are not large projects that require, I guess, a different component of the CARES Act requirement. But we do have those slated for reimbursement through this process, as well as some other tractor and lawnmower equipment that we have. And again, those projects typically aren't eligible for FAA or federal funding. Moving on to the airport development component of the CARES Act, we have a stormwater line relocation, which we're working on, which will create additional space for corporate hangars or large corporate hangars. We've had several requests and we're out of apron space. So this will help us create enough sites to meet our short-term demand. We also have a hangar complex development that's also there. We have a waiting list for our smaller hangars. We've had a waiting list for several years. But again, some of these projects are not typically eligible for federal funding. The criteria that we use is the airport revenues policy. So then these projects then fall under that type of replacement plan. We also have a security system replacement. Again, this is just to update an older system that is no longer or doesn't work as efficiently as we'd like it to. And then you also see the lobby, bathroom, and chair replacement program. Again, those items are not going to be a complete reconstruction of the terminal building, but it will offer, our traveling public a fresh, modern look in the airport, and that's what we're going to go for as well. And we do have some roadway and parking lot paving, as well as a large equipment, which is our vacuum truck replacement that we'll see. And that concludes our plan for the CARES Act. And again, the performance period for that is 4 years from, acceptance of that grant. Questions?
I'll jump in here to start it out. Joel, thanks. Great presentation. And we all know that a thriving airport is important for the city. And, particularly as we see tourism become a more important part of our economy. And it's kind of lagging right now, but I'm confident it'll come back and that their airport will be full again. And it's been tough, man. When you say that one flight a day, those numbers are very tough to digest. Because it's just where we are right now. But again, I'm confident that it'll come back. And this is definitely a silver lining here with this CARES deal, where we can put some money into operating and maintenance and these projects, and we kind of have an opportunity to I hate to say rebrand, but somehow with the new furbishings and the new project going on in there, and the new look, we have a potential there for a new look for that airport. And I know that we're all excited about. Those of us that do a lot of travel or have done a lot of travel love coming back to Waco, and as we kind of make that a special deal as we welcome people into the city, that's the first look that they have. So I'm excited that this CARES funding will help us get to where we want to be, not only from the look of the airport, but also as the airports open back up and we get past this COVID crisis that we're in. But anyway, Joel, thanks so much for the presentation.
Well, thank you so much for the presentation. I agree with Councilmember Holmes. I enjoyed seeing what is planned. I have to say it is hard to digest that one flight a day, especially how we were starting off at the beginning of the year. Once again, another result of COVID-19, but I am hopeful that in a couple of months, we will see that turn around. I will say I am also very grateful for the CARES Act and the financial assistance we're receiving there to do some much needed upgrades to our airport. I'm excited to bring our airport into the new century, and so I'm very excited to see all those. I think those things that even though you would consider them minor repairs or minute repairs, I think they'll go a long way, and I think it'll just speak a lot to the type of city. As when people first come into Waco and they're flying into Waco, obviously the first impression they get is the airport. So I'm very excited that they're going to get some upgrades there, and we're going to be able to see that, and there'll be a more welcoming, more flavor of what Waco has to offer. So I'm very grateful for that. And just the last thing, I remember when I first came on council, there was a suggestion that Mayor Deaver would welcome people, a cardboard stock of Mayor Deaver at the airport. And so I'm still waiting to see that happen. So maybe with these new upgrades, we can see that. So, but overall, great job, sir. Thank you so much.
A bronze.
A bronze.
Bronze would be better.
I'm going to echo the sentiments of my fellow council members, and as someone who works with the tourism industry, I understand that we have taken a big blow, and especially with the trajectory that we were on for the airport. But I am confident that we will return and continue to grow. This is a tremendous opportunity to take what we have and just use it to better the airport that we already have. I am quite sure that Assistant City Manager Emerson is tired of me sending her photos of airports, because it's not about huge structural changes, but it's the little touches that add that warmth in the introduction to the city of Waco. And those are the things that make people go, huh. You know, if this is their first time coming to our city because they're coming for whatever reason, one of the many, many reasons that they will come to our city, that is our first chance to wrap our arms around them. And I mean, a fresh coat of paint and a zipped up bathroom really makes some differences. Trust me on this. So I'm excited to be able to utilize these funds, not only for the tremendous structural things that need to happen on the runways and that kind of business, but you know, just a little touch up goes a long way. So, you know, I am applauding that effort, and I will maybe not send as many photos. And I absolutely support the cutout full mural of Kyle Deaver welcoming people into the city of Waco.
I'll just echo everything that's been said. And to me, this is economic development as we try to recruit businesses and industries to Waco and welcome tourists to make them repeat visitors. This is critical. So what Councilmember Bearfield just said and the other council members just said, I completely agree. And I also want to go on record and support the full cutout of Mayor Deaver.
I think
we're
we should
getting
all have one
unanimous
at this
consent
point.
here.
He'll be bigger. I think we should all have one now. You know, I think just, you know, why just he gets it?
I agree.
All right.
Hey, Midland has the whole council, right? When you walk in, bloop, is right there, everybody.
Exactly. No, this is, hey, just ditto everything. This is great. Appreciate you guys, and looking forward to seeing our modern, souped up and, you know, reapportioned airport. It's gonna be great. Better days ahead.
Agreed. All right. Thank you very much, Will. We appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any requests for future agenda items? Okay. We will now recess the work session and reconvene regular session for executive session as read into the record by the city secretary at 4:55 p.m.
Notice is hereby given. The City Council will go into executive session in accordance with the following provisions. 1, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, permit application for proposed landfill, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality Permit number MSW-2400. 2, attorney briefing, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, and real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072, water park ground lease and operating agreement with Waco Family Entertainment, LLC, assignment, consent to assignment, and assumption of water park ground lease and operating agreement with Waco Family Entertainment, LLC, Storm Master Funding 5678, LLC, and Horizon Family Holdings, LLC, and consent to sublease of water park ground lease and operating agreement with Storm Master Fund 8, LLC. 3, real property, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.072, and 4, economic development, Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.087. We are now in executive session at 4:56 p.m.